Thank you, Chair. We're now streaming live on YouTube. When you're ready, would you like to start the meeting?
Thank you, Wendy. Good morning and welcome to East Devon District Council's Virtual Planning Committee on 5th of May 2021. I'm your Chair, Councillor Eileen Wragg. I would also like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live streaming. All participants here today are taking part remotely, and as well as being live streamed, the meeting is being recorded, so please bear this in mind throughout, and may I remind you to be careful with your language. May I also remind members that the Code of Conduct applies throughout the meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. As this planning meeting is dependent on internet connection and a power supply, in the event of a break in the internet connection or the power supply, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we're not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. Please check the committee page for our website for details. Please make sure all phones are turned off or are on silent. Make sure all microphones are muted when you're not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Keep points short and do not repeat points that have already been made, and please don't interrupt. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand, in this case yellow, and wait to be called. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website, www.eastdevon.gov.uk. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Can you please now unmute your microphone, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you've confirmed you are present, please mute your microphone again. Wendy, can you read out the list, please?
Thank you, Chair. So I'll start with you, Councillor Wragg.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Bloxham?
Present.
Councillor Brown?
Present.
Councillor Coleman?
Present.
Councillor Davey?
Present.
Councillor Tesarin?
Present. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard?
Present. Thank you, Wendy.
Councillor Howe?
Present. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Key?
Present. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pook?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt?
Present. Thank you.
Councillor Skinner?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Whibley?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward?
Present.
Thank you. I can confirm we're quorate this morning. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Wendy. Right. The running order for today's meeting and the speakers list can be viewed under agenda item 1 on pages 4 to 5. Agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meetings held on 7th of April 2021, page 6 to 11. If anyone has a comment on these minutes, please raise your electronic hand. Otherwise, I will take this as an indication that you all agreed with the minutes of the previous meeting. No raised hands, so those minutes are approved. Item 3, apologies. Wendy, can you confirm?
Yes, just one apology from Councillor Bailey.
Thank you. Item 4, declarations of interest. There'll be a roll call for any declarations. Wendy, can you do that, please?
Thank you, Chair. So I'll start with Councillor Bloxham.
None, thank you.
Councillor Brown?
None, thank you.
Councillor Chamberlain?
Yes, agenda item number 14, application number 210241 full in Broadcliffe. It's obviously in my ward as a district councillor, but I'm also a parish councillor for Broadcliffe as well.
Thank you. Councillor Coleman.
I'm next with Town Council on Planning Committee.
Which items do they relate to, Councillor
It
Coleman?
will be the ones in Exmouth.
I will be saying for July.
So that's at agenda item 12.
A month in advance anyway, so
Thank
everything
you.
is out of date all the time, isn't it?
Councillor Davey.
I'm an Exmouth Town Councillor and
Oh,
board
brilliant.
member for
I was
item
so
12. That's 202393 FUL.
Apologies,
Great if
Councillor
Councillor
I
Key
can't hear.
could,
Councillor
can't
Someone
hear.
speaking
Yeah.
in the background, Chair.
if
Councillor Key,
mute
could you
his
put
mic.
your microphone on mute? I think someone's on the phone. Thank you very much.
Okay, sorry,
How
Councillor
much of
Davey.
that did you get, Wendy? Shall I just start again? I'm an
Yes,
Exmouth
please.
Town Councillor, so that's in respect of item 12, 202393 FUL.
Lovely, thank you very much. Councillor De Sarum.
Likewise, I'm an Exmouth Town Councillor. It isn't my ward, but it's agenda item 12, application 202393 FUL. Thank you so much, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard.
Yes, Wendy, item 12, 20/2393 full. I'm an Exmouth Town Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Howell.
None that I know of, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Key.
None, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Pook.
Yeah, item 8, 210302. I'm ward member and Beer Parish Council member.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
None, Wendy.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Councillor Skinner.
None that I'm aware of, Wendy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wibley.
Hi there. Yeah, with regards to item 12, 202393, I am an Exmouth Town Councillor and on the planning committee there. Also, I have had some electronic communication with the applicant who just wanted to ask a few questions regarding sort of the process. And I did meet him briefly as well to discuss similar matters. Thanks.
Thank you.
Wendy, I should just add in there, I've also had some email and phone correspondence with the applicant.
Email.
Forgot to mention that.
Thank you. I'm just popping that in now with applicant. Lovely. Thank you very much.
Wendy, before you go to the next one, so it's Jeff Pook. On item 8, I've also had telephone communication with the applicant for, or the agent for that item.
With the agent. Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, next is Councillor Woodward.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a Exmouth Town Councillor. So item 12, 20/2393, the parade. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. And finally, Councillor Ragg.
Yeah, 20/2393, the applicant spoke with me. I referred him to the other ward members. And it's in my ward, the application. Also, I am, or I was an occasional customer at the 2 establishments that he owns.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Item 5, matters of urgency. There are no matters of urgency to discuss. Item 6, confidential exempt items. There are no confidential exempt items. Item 7, appeals to statistics, page 12 to 19. Chris to update. Please, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. Yeah, so just 2 appeal decisions this month. The first, one of them was dismissed. That was for a certificate of lawfulness, where the inspector agreed with us that the applicant hadn't provided enough information to demonstrate on the balance of probabilities that those structures and uses are more immune from enforcement action. So that certificate appeal was dismissed. And the second one relates to an enforcement appeal, which the inspector nullified. So in effect, the inspector said that there were some errors in the enforcement notice that were beyond their powers of being able to correct, so nullified that enforcement notice. What that means in relation to that case, though, is that we simply have to reserve another enforcement notice on that property addressing the issues that the inspector raised. So just those two decisions this month. Thanks.
Thank you. Right, agenda item 11. This is an application that's come before us before. 22133 full Myrtle Farm child stop, and that's on page 71. Now do we have Tessa Porter in the meeting, please? Is Tessa Porter there?
No, we don't, but I do have a statement to read out.
Yeah, please, Wendy. If you would, after Chris has presented his report. So to you, Mr. Rose, to present your report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, this is an application for replacement farm buildings. So members will recall this from previous meeting. Come on. So yeah, this is the site access in here, and it relates to farm buildings at these two ends of this site edged in red. So members will hopefully recall. There we go. So it relates to replacement of a building here with a farm building here, and replacement of these farm buildings with a building on this part of the site. So the buildings in red on these screens. So this is the existing, the buildings in red to be removed, and then the new buildings put in their place. And then members will probably recall the elevations of those agricultural buildings that are proposed. So it was replacement of these with the building across here, agricultural building, so it's the same buildings. And then as we move down the site, so beyond this building, we get to this building, and it's proposed to be replaced, the building on the left with a new building on the right here, just further down. So members will recall policy D7 of the local plan provides support where there's a genuine agricultural need for agricultural buildings. Members will remember that this application was deferred at the meeting on the 17th of March for the applicant to provide more information justifying the need, because officers were concerned about the limited amount of original information justifying that genuine agricultural need. Members will hopefully recall there were no other concerns raised about highway safety or visual impacts subject to the applicant being able to demonstrate that need. And they were asked to justify the size and scale of the buildings via a business plan for the site and for further information. The applicant, and thanks to them for this, has subsequently employed a professional agricultural consultant and submitted and prepared their case, which includes the business plan and the floor space requirements for the business. So this new information within the business plan evaluates the existing facilities, so all the land and buildings on the site, the farming practices, their future intentions, and gives a detail of their projected profits. And then this sets out their need and justification for the buildings. As you're aware from the photos of the buildings on site at the moment are in a poor condition. They want to carry out some sheep production, sale of lambs, sale of hay and haylage. There's small logging business or logging activities that go on, and they got some chickens. They want to produce some eggs. And some small scale contracting work. So there's a whole mix of enterprises or uses going on here that combined justify the need for these buildings and create this combined income for the business. And based on that business plan, it demonstrates that the margins are there to projected going forward to repay and justify the costs of the new buildings. The details submitted also go into the justification of the size requirements. So given all of those uses that I outlined, they then have justified why they need the footprint and the scale of buildings proposed to deal with each of those issues of the lambs and the hay and the logging, etc. There's no other wider harm. So as I say, there's a landscaping scheme, trees will be protected. And as I said, members determined last time that they didn't have concerns with those as long as the need for the business was justified. So as I say, thank you for the applicant for employing the professional agricultural consultant. We've got the details there now, including that business plan that justify how this farm and that range of activities is going to be used going forward. It justifies the scale of the buildings proposed and the loss of the existing buildings. And in light of that, and as there's no wider landscape or amenity harm, the application is now recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Wendy, can you read out Tessa Porter's statement, please?
Yes, certainly. So I'm reading this on behalf of Tessa Porter in support of the planning application for Myrtle Farm. As a neighbour, as a general point, I believe by choosing to live in a rural setting, one should understand and be sympathetic to agriculture, which is indeed essential to maintain our countryside as we would like to see it, especially in this area of outstanding natural beauty. For this to happen, farming on whatever scale requires suitable facilities to carry out maintenance and production on the land. More specifically, to assess the impact on the neighbourhood, I have studied the proposed plans and visited the site at Myrtle Farm. I believe the proposed new buildings will have no significant impact on the area. This view seems to be shared by the Blackdown Hills AONB partnership, since they have not raised any objections either. The existing stables built for the previous riding school at Myrtle are now in disrepair and unsuitable for agricultural purposes. The new shed will only have a slight larger footprint and very similar height, being timber clad. I feel they will actually enhance the site given time to weather and for the proposed landscaping to be established. I support the shed to the east being brought forward slightly so that the mature oak tree can be preserved. The second shed will have less impact on the view as it will now be viewed end on only. In this carbon conscious time we now live in, I would hope the council would support and encourage the tree and hedge planting included in these plans. As a veterinary surgeon, I believe Myrtle Farm as a small holding lends itself to sheep farming, and I would support the Parsons developing their sheep enterprise. For this to be successful, it is essential that they have buildings fit for purpose. They have to wind down their flock. They have had to wind down their flock in recent time due to lamb and ewe losses from both dog worrying and unsuitable facilities. Due to the often wet and variable weather conditions we can experience, I would advise lambing indoors where there can be adequate space and ventilation. The existing stables, as previously stated, are now in need of replacing but are totally unsuitable for housing sheep. With the proposed increase in flock size, the footprint of these sheds allows enough floor space to house pregnant ewes and pen ewes and lambs as needed. In addition, space will be needed for storage of forage and farm machinery. This is not insignificant when considering hay production and so on involved in running a small holding. Personally, I would rather see this equipment housed and out of sight to enhance the overall appearance of the property and for safety when considering a public footpath runs through Myrtle. In summary, as a member of Chardstock community, I understand we are fully committed to supporting the rural economy. This seems just such a purpose that the local community and the council that represents us should, like myself, fully support. End of statement.
On mute. Thank you, Wendy. We now have the applicant, Corinna Parsons. Corinna? She there?
Yep, I'm here. Thank you.
Oh, welcome to the meeting. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Also, thanks to the committee for giving us the opportunity to support our application with a business plan to allow further consideration to be given to the whole question of need for the replacement buildings. Following submission of that additional information, Officer's report now supports the case for the buildings. Sadly, the Parish Council seem unable to accept that we already have buildings of similar size on the holding which are unusable and unsuitable for farm stock, and this proposal seeks merely to replace what is already there with more functional buildings of a similar size. Officers confirm that the additional information supplied shows that the agricultural activities we currently carry out and propose in the future demonstrates a genuine need for the proposed replacement buildings. The report also confirms that we have shown that the proposed buildings and expansion of our enterprise would generate enough income to bear the cost of the replacement buildings, allowing our holding to remain viable. When viewing our farm from across the valley, we are surrounded by other buildings and are not on a skyline as others suggest. Indeed, any harm to the wider landscape would be very limited due to the replacement nature of the buildings and the planting we propose, which officers accept would mitigate their presence over time. Our application seeks merely to replace existing buildings that have outlived their usefulness and have fallen into disrepair to the point where not only have they become dangerous, but are also unsightly. They cannot be adapted because they were never designed for modern farming. So if our holding is to remain a viable unit, replacement is our only option, which is recognised by our farm consultant in the business plan he prepared for us with for the holding, and is now accepted by the officers as well. I said before, Chairman, that the natural beauty of the East Devon countryside is largely dependent upon farming remaining the dominant user of land. For that situation to continue, large and small holdings must adapt in order to remain competitive and viable. We simply are unable to continue the management of this holding with the buildings in their current state of disrepair and dilapidation. If replacement buildings are not permitted on a farm such as this for farming purposes, where can they be expected to go? I hope members of the committee now feel more able to support our application, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Chalstock Parish Councillor, Councillor Paul Spearing.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, good morning, everybody.
Meeting. You have 3 minutes.
At the March DMC, the planning officer stated that the middle barn was to be replaced by one of the new buildings. This, however, is not the case, as the existing middle barn is being retained. From the outset, this application has been presented in a confusing and unhelpful manner. This application is for a small holding, not a commercial farm. In December, the application was based on 10 acres with access to additional land. Now this application is based on 60 acres. Why was this information not forthcoming at the outset? Councillor David Key was right in the March DMC in questioning whether these buildings can be justified on the basis of rented land. The buildings are proposed in an unspoilt landscape befitting of the AONB. This landscape is not just for the next 4 years to cover the term of the rented land or until this family moves home. The AONB needs preservation for future generations. The buildings proposed need to be in proportion with the property. Otherwise, it sets a precedent for anyone to build what they like. The previous buildings pre-2018 were of a scale which was discrete in the landscape. It has not been explained why buildings of 5 metres in height are required to look after sheep. As a parish council, we are not against replacement and some redesign of the existing structures. We feel strongly that the scale, volume and height of the proposals are excessive for the stated needs and the detrimental impact they will have on the landscape in the AONB, which should be afforded the highest status of protection. Local Plan Policy D7 clearly states that new agricultural buildings should be, I quote, well integrated with its surroundings and closely related to existing buildings, being of appropriate location, scale, design and materials so as not to harm the character, biodiversity and landscape of the rural area, particularly within the AONB. In addition, the new buildings contravene our neighbourhood plan policies CPNP 03, protecting the built environment, and CPN P04, protecting the natural environment, in that development, including for agriculture, should not degrade the visual appeal of the rural landscape. Importantly, there is the climate emergency to consider, which East Devon and Charlestown Parish Council have
30
endorsed.
seconds remaining.
Has the carbon footprint of this application been sufficiently considered? There is scant regard for a green approach to the construction of these proposed buildings. We hope this committee will reject the application with recommendation for a more moderate and sympathetic scheme, perhaps just 2 buildings with a significant reduction in height. The owners may at a later date apply for additional barn space based on a proven track record for sheep farming, but that's for another time. We respectfully request and recommend refusal. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Spearing. Councillor Paul Hayward.
Thank you, Chair and members. Firstly, of course, I'll declare an interest as the clerk to Charlestown Parish Council, working for the council from the previous speaker. So this is an application where, of course, I, as the ward member, am taking a different view to that of the parish council. And as members will understand, often in our roles, the views we have as ward member can conflict with others. But that's the role that I took, and hence why I don't really intend to go into any further depth than I did the last time I spoke on this, and members will recall my statements in support. And I'm grateful to the applicant for providing us additional information as requested. I'm grateful to the parish council for continuing to stand steadfast in their views. But on the balance of improvement and helping our rural economy and taking on board the fact that the conditions which have been sought have been integrated into the proposed recommendation for approval, I am still of a mind as the ward member to support this application, given that the sensitive and appropriate planting proposed, especially in conjunction with our own officers, will make these buildings blend into the background. And I do know, of course I do, what the parish council says in a number of ways, but on this matter, it's almost the converse of having a predetermined view. It's the opposite of that. I've considered it. I've talked to the applicant. I've heard what the parish council said. I've heard what objectors and supporters have said. And I would ask the committee to go along with the officers' proposal of support on this occasion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Mrs. Parsons, would you be prepared to answer any questions from the committee members, please?
Yes, that'd be absolutely fine.
Thank you. Now, can you take your hands down, please, and just put your hand up if you have a question? Thank you. Well, I see a number of hands still up. Well, they're going down. Right, Councillor Davey, you have a question?
I do, Chair, thank you. Yes, reference has been made to the carbon footprint of the buildings. I had a look at the plans, and it's quite hard to make out what the materials are, but I wonder if the applicant could just tell us what materials are going to be used for the construction of the buildings.
We'll be using the same materials as what we've got with the stables at the moment, so it'll be Waveney Edge timber cladding. So if you look at the other, so it's kind of live edge cladding, so it will still be wood, but it will blend in better with the countryside than that sawn cladding that you can see in that picture there.
Thank you.
Could I just ask about the frames? Are they
yes.
Wood or
timber frames?
Timber frames. Thank you.
I believe.
That answer your questions, Councillor Davey. Councillor Skinner, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Actually, it was on the similar line, so I think it's been answered. Actually, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Now, next up, I think was Councillor Chamberlain.
Thank you, Chair.
We're into debate now.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. I was going to say I didn't have a question so much. Mine
No.
was about the whole application. Thank you very much, Chair. I would just like to also thank the applicant for coming back with the agricultural consultants plan going forward. This is something that I do support massively, and I'm really pleased that they've come back with that consultant and that report going forward. And to hear that it's going to make the holding remain viable is absolutely fantastic. I worry about farming going forward massively. I'm involved in it myself, and it's something that we do need in our countryside. So it's really nice to see an application come forward where we've got a family that want to build on what they've got here and move it further forward. So for those reasons, I'm actually really in support of the officer's recommendation for approval with conditions. Thank you.
So is that a proposal?
Second.
Yes,
Councillor
yes,
Franklin?
it is.
Second that, Chairman.
Who was that? Councillor
Councillor
Key?
Key, yes.
Yeah, thank you. So that's been proposed and seconded. Now, unless there's anything else to add.
Yes, can I just say, Chairman, as been mentioned by the person in the objector, I see that because I mentioned about the land, and I'm very, very pleased to see that they now have a 5-year business tenancy, which is what most of the rented farms are put on now, and it's very, very good. It's very, very sad that this has had to come to a second meeting, because if the professional advice had been given in the first place, this would have been over and done with, and they would have been in the throes of actually putting the buildings up now. So I'm very pleased for the points that they put forward, which is what we asked for, and good luck to them for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Key. Now, unless there's anything to add to this, I'll move to the vote, but I see there are hands up. Councillor De Sarum.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Chair. I was just going to say that I must commend the consultant for the fact they mentioned that in this carbon conscious time that there'll be sufficient tree and hedge planting. So I think, in my mind, that certainly weighed up as a very positive measure that was going to be produced. And I also note, as Mr. Rose has said, that there'd be no wider harm. So, like everyone else, I too can only wish the applicant the very best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. I'm just pleased that I feel that common sense has prevailed on this occasion. And I think the change of recommendation is a very good outcome. And I think it shows we were right to defer on this occasion. I'm not always happy with deferral, but I think it was right. And I'd like to wish the applicant every success in their enterprise. It sounds a really good mixed economy enterprise. And I really hope they can make a success of it. And as Councillor Chamberlain has said, farming isn't easier. I'll just say about farm buildings, they're rarely carbon neutral, nothing is. But I would say metal and wood are probably a lower carbon footprint than concrete and brick. And we're quite happy to approve applications for concrete and brick all the time. So I don't think that's particularly relevant.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Councillor Skinner, something to add?
I think it's all been said, to be fair.
Thank you.
Chair, so I'll leave it to that.
Okay, can we move to Shirley then? Thank you. Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members, you've got one motion here, and that is to approve subject to the conditions as listed in the report. When your name is called, please would you indicate whether you're in support of the motion to approve, whether you're against the motion to approve, or whether you're abstaining from the vote.
Thank you. Councillor Bloxham.
Support approval.
Councillor Brown.
Support.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Support.
Councillor Coleman.
Support.
Councillor Davey.
Support approval.
Councillor De Sarum.
Support motion to approve.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support.
Councillor Howe.
Support.
Councillor Key.
Approve.
Councillor Pook.
Support.
Councillor Pratt,
Support.
Councillor Skinner,
Support.
Councillor Whibley,
Support.
Councillor Woodward,
Support.
Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
Thank you. The vote to approve has been unanimously carried.
Thank you. Then we move to agenda item 10, application 210344, outline minor Merivale Exton on page 61. Over to you, Mr. Rose, to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an outline application for a detached dwelling with all matters reserved. So we can see the site here at the back of the property called Merivale. So all details are reserved. So we're just looking at the principle of development on here. And you can see from the indicative layout here of how they've shown how get access down an existing lane into the site, 2 parking spaces, a small sort of bungalow on the site, maybe with rooms in the roof, and then amenity space around. And this application's here because it's contrary to the view of the ward member. So here's an area of Exton. So this is our application site in here. Hopefully you can see my cursor. So that's the site, and then it's this green area, at the back of the garden there. And that's the existing layout of the site. And then these are the photos. So this is Merivale to the right, and you go down the existing access lane that serves a property. And then we get to this garden area at the bottom behind this fencing. So in here off to the right. So you'll see from the report, in terms of the principle of development, Exton is in the countryside with no built up area boundary. So therefore, policy S7 of the local plan is relevant. And that says that to support development in the countryside, we need a policy in the local plan or in a neighbourhood plan, which there isn't one, to support development in these locations. And Exton isn't one of the settlements under strategy 27 of the local plan that's listed as being suitable for infill development. So whilst Exton has some good transport links, there is a train station, it's on the cycle route path of the estuary. There is a bus route along the main road to Exmouth. It wasn't considered at the local plan stage and by the local plan inspector to be a sustainable location because there's no shop, post office, school, and therefore residents will be dependent on the car. There's appeal decisions that are relevant here. There have been 2 appeal decisions closer to the train station where inspectors have found that sites in Exton, as I say, very close to the train station and the cycle path and the pub have been considered to be sustainable and have granted consent for dwellings. But this site is 600 metres away from those on a road that doesn't have a footpath. And in this case, it's relevant to note, hopefully you can see that orange blob there on the screen. That's a site where there was a previous appeal decision into February 2000 for a dwelling in the rear garden that went to appeal. And in that case, the inspector dismissed the appeal, saying that the proposal was contrary to local plan policy, so strategy 727 and TC2, because it wasn't close enough to a range of services and facilities, and that there was nothing in favour of the development to outweigh those local plan policies. So we've got a bit of an unusual situation here with Exton, where it doesn't have a built-up area boundary, but we've got appeal decisions right around the core of the pub and the train station, the cycle path, that say that that part of Exton is sustainable. But then we've had appeal decisions literally 4 doors away from this application site to say that this part of Exton isn't sustainable. So given that appeal decision 4 doors away in February 2000, given the lack of built-up area boundary here and the footpath to those services and facilities not being a footpath, officers are recommending refusal on the basis of the unsustainable location of the dwelling, contrary to the local plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Right, now we have the agent, Alan Reckon. Alan, Is he there?
I am here. Can you hear me, Madam Chairman?
Can hear you. Familiar voice.
Can you see me?
Not yet, but you're there somewhere, I know.
Okay, well, thank you.
You'd like to speak? You've got 3 minutes. You know the score.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this application. I want to start by saying Exton is allegedly not regarded as a sustainable settlement. I'll explain what I mean by allegedly in a minute. It means it's classed as being within the countryside of East Devon. Having looked at that Google shot on your screen there, I suspect most residents in the village would disagree on that point. Mr. Wood, the applicant, heartened by the support for the development from his ward councillor, his parish council and a near neighbour. There have been no objections to the application. Exton was not, again, I'm saying allegedly identified as a settlement suitable for new residential development under Strategy 27 because it doesn't contain a range of everyday services or facilities, placing over-reliance on the use of the private car. In my view, treating the village as one that's in the countryside is illogical in relation to its location, size and form. Exton's a coherent village, church, pub, restaurant, mini market, main through road, good regular connections by bus, a railway station, even a cycle track. It's an active village hall with various well-supported community activities. So moving on to the list of settlements included in Strategy 27, this was based on what's called a Small Towns and Villages Development Suitability Assessment, produced in 2014. Now, if you look closely at that assessment, you'll find that Exton wasn't actually assessed for suitability or otherwise. It doesn't actually appear in it. The assessment looked at 27 settlements that did not have a suitable level of provision and took away their built-up area boundaries, so they were not included in Strategy 27. Exton's not on that list. It then looked at 15 other settlements that were considered to be sustainable. Exton's not in that list either, but in my view, it should have been. So it's not actually been assessed for sustainability in your local plan. Had it have been, then it might well have retained its original BUAB. Madam Chairman, if I could briefly say that Mr. Rose might want to come back on that insofar as some of the appeals are concerned. Turning to appeals, it has been tested. The Strategy 27 has been tested, but no one seems to have raised the fact that it wasn't included in the assessment. Most significant, if you exclude the 3 houses built at Exton Park Farm, which were outside of the former BUAB when it had one, there was an appeal involving a new dwelling at Orchard Cottage along the avenue, some way from the village, further from the village than Merrydale. That appeal was dismissed because that site lies within a green wedge. But the inspector looked at sustainability of Exton and found it was not remote from essential facilities. When you make comparisons with Orchard Cottage at Merrydale, it's closer to Exeter Station, close to the core of the village, 500 metres to the bus stop that provides a regular service, closer to Exton Lane bus stop on the same service. The Exeter Cycle Trail runs along Exton Lane. It's got a railway station. The cycle trail forms part of National Cycle Route 2 and linking to the village. So, Madam Chairman, I would say, and I'd like Mr. Rose perhaps to comment, if he may, if I can ask him on the assessment, as to why Exton doesn't appear in it. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Rose, would you like to respond to that, please?
Not really. I suppose. Well, what I would say is, I think Mr. Brecken is grasping at straws if he wants to go back and start looking at evidence behind the local plan. The starting point is the local plan that's been adopted. It doesn't class Exton as having a built-up area boundary. The reasons for that being it's an unsustainable location. And as I say, I don't think I've really got more to add other than, there have been appeal decisions that say in the sites around the pub and the cycle path and the station are sustainable, but there's not much more I can say other than, there was an appeal decision in February last year, 4 doors up, that said that this location isn't sustainable in terms of local plan policy. So I don't think it's helpful to go back looking at evidence from 7 years ago. We've got an appeal decision from February 2020 saying a site 4 doors up isn't suitable location. And I think that's what we should be giving more weight to. Thanks.
Thank you. Right, now we have Ward Member Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. According to our local plan, Exton is a village without a built-up area boundary. and considered as unsustainable location without adequate facilities. So technically, for planning purposes, this location is in the open countryside, but Exton is on the main bus route to Exeter with a bus every 20 minutes. It's got a railway station, a pub, a village hall, a church, a forecourt shop, which has just been updated and is only classified as not being sustainable because it hasn't a school, but there's a school bus. This has been tested by several planning inspectors, as Chris Rose has just reported. Decisions over the last few years, and some dwellings have been approved, which were in walking distance to the station, and others on the far side of Exmouth Road being regularly refused. A case in point, planning application 151619 FUL, right next to the station, was refused on sustainable grounds using the then emerging local plan in 2015. But the inspector's decision overturned and approved the decision. I quote from his report: Exton Railway Station offers regular train services throughout the day and evening to both Exeter and Exmouth. As a result, in my opinion, given the convenience of access to the station, I have no doubt that in spite of the rural location, this site is an accessible one that would give residents a real choice about how they travel by sustainable means. The proposal you are considering today is some 600 metres from the station, but no further than the Cranbrook station to most of the houses in Cranbrook. So what has been the result of our local plan for Exton? 23 extensions have been approved, making smaller houses bigger and bigger houses even more massive. 11 outbuildings allowed. One conversion of a redundant building, one live-work unit. 3 new builds followed previously agreed outline applications. 6 knocked down small dwellings to build bigger family homes. 4 dwellings approved by the planning inspector, refers to in 2015. This has resulted in no houses for residents to allow downsize unless they move out of the village. The knock-on of this is that residents move away, but requiring to travel back to see their friends and family at Exton. Well, that's not very sustainable. So the local plan and Strategy 27 has not worked for Exton. And the rule book says this applicant cannot build a small dwelling to downsize to enjoy their well-deserved retirement and free up a family house for another family to move in. To me and many residents of Exton, that does not make sense. I much favoured the original local plan that small communities were to be allowed to build 5% more, but the inspector threw this out and we gobbled together Strategy 27. We are now embarking on a new local plan, and I do hope this time we can get it right for the smaller villages, because recommendations like this one are clearly not right and are not logical. Parts of Exton are clearly sustainable, and with the correct wording, this application could be agreed that due to the proximity to the station, the X trail cycleway that passes right by the front gate, this application is approved as an exception to Strategy 27. This minor exception would not blow a hole in the local plan, and anyway, our new local plan will hopefully be less restrictive to our smaller communities. The NPPF and our local plan are for planning guidance purposes and open to interpretation. Common sense is permissible if it's justified, and I really believe in this case it is. Therefore, support the residents of Exton, support the parish councillors of Woodbury, who all believe this small house in the middle of the village should be permitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Benningham.
Thank you, Chair. Can I start by saying that it's my opinion that the NPPF and the East Devon local plan are open to interpretation, but not misinterpretation, Chair. Can I say that it was interesting listening to Mr. Brecon quoting from years past on the process of creating an emerging local plan, and also that Councillor Young referred to appeal decisions taken when we had an emerging local plan, which means we didn't have a local plan, and that worked against many of our judgments at that time. But I ask members to listen very carefully to Mr. Rose and what he said to you. You see, between 1995 and 2015, Exton more than doubled the number of houses within that community. That's a huge amount of growth. Does it have the sustainability and support for sustainability within the community? No, it doesn't, as has been highlighted, which is why, as a community, as a village, a settlement, Exton does not appear in Strategy 27. So if you were to approve this application, then you would be undermining the protection of Exton as a community, as a settlement, with relation to the local plan. And I believe that would be unhelpful to Exton. Can I also say, especially to the rural members of this committee, if you pass this application, that also undermines the effect of Strategy 27 in all of those villages and hamlets that do not have a built-up area boundary. It serves no purpose whatsoever for our strategic future within planning to pass this application. If you reject it, then you are supporting Strategy 27, not only in Exton, but throughout East Devon. And that's what we have to do. That may change when we have a new local plan. We may choose to revise that. But until then, Chair, I ask your committee to support the officer's decision, because Chris Rose is right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ingham. Right, I would say that you will have heard Chris Rose say that just 4 doors away, an appeal was dismissed. So I'd like you to bear that in mind when making your decision. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. I think I probably cycled past this application site yesterday. I'd have stopped and had a look if I'd realised. It's a bit of an anomaly, this one, isn't it? Because we are going to be looking at an application a bit later, which is suggesting approval on the grounds of the transport links that it's got in Blackhorse. I think that was the one. That lane, it's been suggested there is no footpath along it. That is absolutely right. But that lane is regularly used by walkers and cyclists. And motorists know that. And motorist speeds are very, very sedate along there. I've never met anybody speeding along there. They know that they're going to meet walkers and cyclists, and they drive accordingly. I think there is definitely more food for thought in revision of our local plan. I think it's a bit of a shame there isn't a community shop there. I'd have thought they could support that, and I'd like to see somebody get that together. I think the question to ask here is not whether they will use a car. The chances are they probably will. I live in Exmouth, which is considered a highly sustainable location, and yet the amount of traffic is absolutely ridiculous. I think the question to ask is, if they wished to avoid car use, could they? They're right on a cycle path. They've got a train station within comfortable walking distance. As Councillor Young has said, they've got a 20-minute bus service along another lane. It seems a very strange anomaly that this is considered an unsustainable location. One of the facilities mentioned is a school. Well, you get on your bike with your kids, you could cycle to school in Totcham or Lympstone, and probably about a 15-minute bike ride away. I struggle to see this as an unsustainable location. And as a Green, I take sustainability extremely seriously. But I feel that there are some locations where people say to me, I can't survive without a car because I can't walk along those lanes. I wouldn't dare cycle along them. This isn't one of them. And I think that this is a place where if you wish to avoid the car, you can do it. And that, to me, makes it far more sustainable. So I am happy to support this application.
Are you making that a proposal?
I am.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Sorry, who was that?
Councillor Skinner.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, would you like to speak on that, Councillor Skinner?
Well, thank you, Chair. And I think what Councillor Davey has said has almost echoed most of the things that I was thinking. This is a really finely balanced application. And I think the officers, and I want to commend the officers, because the officers, Mr. Chris Rose and his team, have done absolutely what they've asked, what has been asked of them through our planning policies that has been put forward to them by us as councillors. We've put the policy there and he's absolutely adhering to it. There are, from what Mr. Breckham was saying, there are reasons where some of this has gone to a planning inspector at different applications around. Some have been overturned, some haven't, and all the rest of it. But I think what Mr. Davey absolutely echoed from what I've supported in principle many occasions on this planning committee, and that is to say that when you have a train station as close as by as where it is, the cycle links as close by as where it is, a main road with a as the ward member Councillor Young actually put out there, the bus running every 20 minutes. This particular hamlet, it falls between two stalls in one sense. It falls within a village environment that falls with no boundary, settlement boundary around it. So therefore falls under the policy of being outside of a boundary policies, and therefore becomes development in the countryside. But clearly looking at the photo in front of us, can really all of us look at that and say that common sense doesn't prevail? So for me, it is a very finely balanced one, and I heard absolutely what Councillor Ingham was suggesting in saying, you know, we don't want to just throw against our policies without good reason. But I think the case has been put forward by the parish council. It's been put forward by the ward member. It's been put forward by Councillor Davey, and I'm going to support his reg. And it was quite finely balanced, but I'm going to fall on supporting what he's saying, because when it comes down to it, this appears to me to be a common sense approach going forward. I think.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Thank you, Councillor De Sarum.
Thank you, Chair. I think, as we have said, the problem here in this case is what to do with smaller villages, so that ultimately that people do not move out of the villages, as has been said. The ward member mentioned and gave a list of all the changes that have happened to Exton. And of course, Mr. Rose quite rightly pointed out the appeal decision in February 2020. When I read this, I was struck by the fact that it was a north and southern divide, as it said on page 66, that if he had been in the southern side, the applicant may have been found more favour, but it goes on to say that the applicant in this site is located towards the northern end, which means that this problem has come up to us. So I totally get where policy says that we are in an unsustainable location, but I think that as has been stated, there are other ways of getting about. I mean, I understand that we mustn't put sites where there is dependency on the use of the car. That is an absolute no-no, but clearly, as both Councillor Skinner and Councillor Davey have mentioned, there is this ability to go about your business using other alternative sustainable means of travel. So for that reason, and the fact that Exton has, as the ward member has said, so many things have happened to it development-wise, I think we'd have no choice but to go against the recommendation and approve it, basically, on this occasion. So that's why I would support them. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to go to Mr. Rose. I think you might want to respond to some of those comments.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I suppose I'm understanding the proposal and the fact that members feel that this is finely balanced. I suppose it's my job to remind members that the starting point for consideration here is the local plan policies, which this proposal is against. And where you've got these proposals where you think they're finely balanced or there are cases for development, then we look at other material considerations. And in this case, there's an appeal decision from February 2020, 4 Doors Up, backing up the local plan policies and refusal on the basis of the unsustainable location. So what I would ask members to think of, and if they are going to move, vote on, or which will do, vote on approval, is highlighting what's different between this site and that appeal decision in February 2020 that would enable you to grant consent here without it being in conflict with that appeal decision, which is a material consideration. And also just to say that, it's not really this isn't really the forum to set policies going forward. I understand there's a debate here to be had about Exton, and the right place to have that is as part of the current local plan review in terms of where should Exton go with development and all other villages. And the final point, of course, is that if I understand the one of the ward members' views in the parish council, but that a neighbourhood plan could be produced if they were concerned about not having development or wanting it of a certain kind. So I understand the recommendation. I suppose it's just a word of warning and a plea, please, to take into account that appeal decision. And if you can, if you're moving forward to approving it, highlight what the differences are between this scheme and that dismissed appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. And I think it's worth bearing in mind that in the event of a future planning application coming forward, an inspector would refer to this appeal should that one go to appeal. Worth bearing in mind, you might be opening the floodgates. Councillor Howe.
Thank you. I think Mr. Rose has pretty well summed up exactly what I was thinking. This isn't clear-cut, it's far from it, but I think approving this is the wrong thing to do. We are making policy, which is for strategic planning, in our planning committee. And that is just plain wrong. If the local residents wanted these type of approvals here and new houses put in, they would have done a neighbourhood plan. That would have also given the local community choice and chance to shape their further development. They chose not to do a neighbourhood plan, so that means they like and approve of our designation under the local plan. We should not make up policy here. And quite honestly, 4 Doors Up, if we approve this, 4 Doors Up should come back in with an application again, and we can't refuse it then, even with an appeal decision saying refuse. Added to the fact, all the other land that now, as you look at all those nice gardens that could be developed on, there would be no stopping Exton. I think it's very dangerous without policy, thought, consideration, and development to make this right. I don't agree with our local plan, don't get me wrong. I do think Exton is or should be sustainable in the new local plan, but there's a right way and a wrong way of doing things, and this is the wrong way, so I cannot support it.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. You've echoed my thoughts and my statement far more eloquently than I put it. Thank you for that. Councillor Key.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I totally support what Councillor Howe has just said, in actual fact. I mean, they're going to have to use transport to get away because there's no pavements there whatsoever. What does baffle me in actual fact, okay, yes, this is not sustainable. I have a village very, very near me as well that the appeals turned down, and that had a school, a church, 2 shops, a garage, 100 yards to a bus service, on the main line from Axminster to Honiton, and the officer turned that, or the appeals turned that down because it was unsustainable. That had, as I say, a school which Exton doesn't have. I certainly can't support the approval of this because I think it would absolutely open the floodgates and we would be in desperate situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Key. Councillor Skinner, you want to speak again?
Yes, and I think Councillor Howe made a very strong point, and I'd like to add to that. So this is going to be strange for me to have to do this. But of course, one of the challenges we could have here is that if we were to refuse this application, the test of time would be that if the applicant then decides to appeal, we would then see whether our policies held up or not. And on that sort of basis, because it is so finely balanced, and listening to the debate that has gone forward, as much as my heart is telling me that I think the common sense and the right thing to do is to approve this application, the points that Councillor Howe put over will very resonate to me, that if we actually, this is not the place to change our policies here. And he did go on to say that he doesn't exactly agree with the policy that it is at the moment, but here is now not the time and place. So through you, Chair, if I may, and I do apologise to Councillor Davey, but I think I'm going to retract from seconding this particular motion to approve this application, because my heart is telling me we ought to approve for all the right reasons, but my head is telling me that actually this is the wrong thing to do at this moment in time. And on that basis, if we balance it up on the basis that perhaps the applicant could go to appeal, that would then test our resolve as whether or not we were accurate or not in our decision. So I'm going to retract, if you don't mind, through you, Chair. I'm going to retract the seconder, and whether there's others would support it, that's fine. But I'm going to not approve this application and go with the officer's recommendation, because that is clearly, in my head now, the right thing to do. And I apologise for my retraction to Councillor Davey. I do apologise for that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Skinner. And you made a pertinent point there. Is there another seconder, please, for Councillor Davies' proposal? No. Councillor Davey, your hand is up. Councillor Howe?
Well, as Councillor Davies' proposal has failed, I would like to move refusal as per officer's recommendation.
And I'll second that, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Key seconded.
Yes.
Right, proposed and seconded. Councillor Davey, your hand's gone down now, so I assume you don't want to speak. Over to you then, Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as we now only have one motion that has been moved and seconded, members have one motion, and that is to refuse the application for the reason as set out in the report. Please would you indicate when your name is called whether you're in support of the motion to refuse, whether you're against the motion to refuse, or whether you're abstaining from the vote. Thank you.
Councillor Bloxham.
Support the motion to refuse.
Councillor Brown.
Support the motion to refuse.
Councillor Chamberlain.
I support the motion to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coleman.
Abstain.
Councillor Davey.
Against the motion to refuse.
Councillor Dasaram.
Very sadly, I have to support the motion to refuse.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support.
Thank you. Councillor Howe.
Support refusal.
Councillor Key.
Support refusal.
Councillor Pook.
Support
Councillor
refusal.
Pratt.
Support refusal.
Councillor Skinner.
Regrettably, support refusal.
Councillor Whibley.
Yeah, regrettably, support refusal as well.
Councillor Woodward.
Support refusal.
Councillor Ragg.
Support refusal.
Thank you. The vote to refuse has been carried.
Thank you. Right, then we move on to agenda item 8, application 210302, full. It's a minor application, lovely name, Bumbles Locker, Beer, page 20. And I think Anne Oxley, is she in the meeting?
I believe she is.
Yeah, thank you. And also Andrew Paley, the agent. Oh, and Anne Bolch.
Yes, Anne Bolch is in the meeting. Let me just check Mr. Paley on my list. Yes, Mr. Paley is in the meeting as well.
Okay, welcome to the meeting, all of you. And now over to Mr. Rose to present this report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this is an application for a change of use of 2 shops to live-in accommodation, described as a multi-bedroomed holiday let. So you can see the location here in Beer. There's changes to the shop front and rear elevations. So one of the shop fronts is to be removed, and then at the rear there's a small extension and some dormer windows. It's before you as there's an objection from the ward member. So this is the site at the upper end of the town centre in Beer. So you can see the church, then it goes down towards the beach. And this is an extract showing the extent of the town centre. And the site is up here, so it's within the town centre, shopping centre, the village centre for Beer. And these are the sites, so you can see the context of the site, the long garden at the rear, parking access from a narrow courtyard there, and there's just a small extension proposed on the rear with a couple of dormers. The site's in the flood zone, so the map of the flood zone there, and then these are the proposed floor plans. So the 2 shops at the ground floor here get changed to accommodation. This shop front changes, and then we end up with accommodation throughout, large diner, and a number of bedrooms upstairs. So the front of the property, so you can see shop front retained here, but altered here with the new door and to mirror the windows above, and some Velux windows in the roof. And then to the rear, we get this extension here to provide a staircase, and we have these 2 cat slide dormer windows. And this is this is looking down the street. So the properties are these 2 here on the left. So this is looking down towards the beach. Again, these 2 properties here, and again here. So this shop front would retain. This one would get blocked up with a door and a window to match the windows above. And then we got the view of the rear. So we get the extension on the top and the 2 dormer windows. So we are in the built up area boundary, as I've said. We've got 1 unit is 15 square meters, the others is about 35 square meters. And we're also in the town centre, and it's also a conservation area in a flood zone. And also relevant here is the Beer neighbourhood plan, which is made, and the sites in the town centre for that as well. So there are a number of policies relevant here. So we've got policies S6 and S27 that support residential development in built up area boundaries, but we've also got strategy 32 and policy 14 that resist the loss of community or commercial space unless site's been adequately marketed for at least 12 months or 24 months, depending on circumstances. But again, there's also policies in the local plan, strategy 33 and E16 that support tourism. We've also got the villages plan, and that prevents town centre uses or that permits town centre uses, but residential uses, but only where they maintain and enhance the character and diversity of the centre, and they don't impact on the vitality and viability of the shopping offer. And again, mentions this need for a minimum of 12 months marketing before we should accept the loss of commercial units. And that's reflected really in the neighbourhood plan So that resists the loss of employment land and buildings. It supports residential uses in the centre, but only again where the current uses are no longer viable, where the building's been offered the community and there's no visual harm. But there's also support in the neighbourhood plan for holiday accommodation. So there's lots of policies here that are relevant, a number which support tourism, which are in favour of the proposal, but against that are the policies that resist the loss of retail units in town centres unless it's demonstrated they're no longer viable and that they've been marketed without success. I think it's also relevant to mention here that the new permitted development rights, so the shops are now classed as this new Class E. So without planning permission, these units could move to offices, professional services, estate agents, etc., without now needing planning permission. So it could move to alternative uses without needing planning permission. With regard to those policies I mentioned in marketing, there's a need for the property to have been marketed for 12 months or 24 months, depending on market conditions, and to demonstrate a lack of need for the units. You'll see from the report, the unit was marketed in October 19 for just over £600,000 and there was no offers received. And then there were two people interested in the unit, as we understand, through the year's marketing. But it was, I think they were both also interested in a residential use. And I understand it was marketed with the potential to go to some sort of residential use, subject to planning permission. But it was marketed as a sole agent and it was marketed on a national property website for a year. But in March 2020, they reduced the price down to £575,000 and then it eventually sold in October 2020. So as soon as that year, 12 months of marketing was up, it was sold to the current applicant. We don't know how much for. With regard to the applicant's case and viability, they've said that they're both very small units here. There's limited footfall at the top end of this town. One of the units doesn't have washing or toilet facilities, so that's the smaller unit. There's no parking. That it's harmful to the town that these units have been vacant for so long, and that the units struggle because the retail business in Beer is so seasonal. And there's also the issue here of coronavirus and the shops and that being closed, which does then bring into some doubt the year's worth of marketing of the units, because a lot of that marketing has happened at unpredictable and unusual times when you wouldn't expect people necessarily to be able to want to invest in shops when they don't know what the future is. So the marketing has been done, but it was marketed as 2 units. Again, there's a question there about whether there are alternative units. Could they have marketed the units individually, or I think as Councillor Pook has put in his comments, could they have kept one of the retail units? But that's not the proposal we have in front of us. The proposal is for conversion of both units. So there has been marketing carried out, but it's been done at a difficult time, so I put it that way. And therefore that might put some doubt in members' minds about whether the timing of that and the 12 months and the way it's been done has been adequate. But balanced against that are those issues I raised about the small nature of the shop, the fact they've been vacancy, the lack of toilets and WC facilities for one of the units in particular, and the fact that sort of across the road and down a bit, so just sort of behind, I think, where this photo was taken, we have granted consent for another unit, a retail unit, to go to residential use back in 2020, I think it was, because again, that had been marketed and it was demonstrated that there was no interest in that retail unit. So it's a difficult one. On balance, officers are recommending approval, given that some marketing has been carried out, given the current market conditions and given those issues that the applicants raised about the difficulty of letting the shop. With regard to the other issues, it's a good design of the shop fronts. We don't have any concerns about that. No concerns from the conservation officer. There wouldn't be any visual concerns. There were dormers proposed to the front originally, but they've now been removed and replaced by roof lights, and we're not concerned about the visual impact of the dormers to the rear. And one benefit from the scheme is the applicant has advised that they're going to replace those UPVC windows with timber, so there is some visual benefit, but there's no harm to the character of the conservation area. So on balance, officers are recommending approval, given that marketing and those case put forward with the applicant about why it might be difficult for this unit to coming back into retail use. But as I say, it is a very on balance recommendation to approve. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, I'd like to ask a question. The larger towns have primary shopping frontage areas, don't they? Or is it principal? But anyway, does that apply to the smaller towns?
Well, the whole, well, in a way, yes, the whole of this town centre here is protected. So we can take that as being, all of it being the primary and the important retail frontage, including this site.
Okay, thank you. My concern with this is that the buyer bought it not intending perhaps to use it for commercial purposes, well, not for a shop anyway, but for residential use. But anyway, we have now Anne Oxley. Anne Oxley, you have 3 minutes.
Right, I think my question has already been answered, but our objection was to the dormer windows on the front elevation of the building, because they would have caused a lack of privacy to our home, which is opposite on the first floor. But I can see that there has been an amendment for the conservation roof lights, and if they are set higher up in the front elevation, then they wouldn't cause us any problem. Because our main objection really was that if the dormer windows had been put on the front, then there would have been a direct view down into our lounge main bedroom and further lounge bedroom. So I was just coming on to ensure that the change to the conservation roof lights in lieu of the dormer windows is definitely agreed. And otherwise I have no further objection.
Thank you. Anne Bolch. Anne Bolch?
Hello, hi.
Hello, you have 3 minutes. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, that's great. The reason for objection is not really, it's not that we're against development or change, but within the actual village centre there, it seems to be that, you know, different people's priorities go in different ways. But, you know, for myself and a lot of local people, we just feel that this is really sad to lose another shop within the village that is, it's small, admittedly, and there aren't many shops. But with 2 less shops, or 1, because one of the things I was going to say was that unit or those 2 units have been used as 1 shop in the past. So it could be used as 1 unit, although because the second one doesn't have facilities within it, it can be used, and it's been in the past used by 1 person. That we're just losing another village amenity. And although you're talking about coming to the village and they're making, you know, the holiday accommodation, that is one thing. But people that are coming here on holiday need somewhere to go to shop. They like to walk through the village and visit the shops. And with this premises not being a shop anymore, it is just not viable. We don't need any more holiday homes. We've got lots of holiday homes. I know that it's busy now because of staycation and all that, and people are coming to Beer because of staycation, but we've got lots of holiday homes. We don't need any more holiday homes. Yes, they can convert upstairs and do whatever they see fit, but why change downstairs when there could be shops in there? The point about it being advertised for an amount of time where they didn't get any, take up on the shop. It is because it's since COVID. I know not initially, but we're just into COVID. And there are people that are looking for premises at the moment, and small villages and shops, small shops are coming back. There's no doubt about it. The town centres may be dying in the city, but there's a call for village shops here in Beer, and I know that there are people that are interested. Sorry. And I think that there is finding a balance. There is a balance. We do have a holiday accommodation, but we do need to have shops and support shops within our village to make our village still work and be alive. It does go quiet in the winter, but we've got a prime example of a lady that's opened a chocolate shop that has been open all through COVID, all through the winter, and she's done amazingly well. So it is possible that this can work, and I just wish that they would take a minute to think of the village and think of the people that live here.
Okay, thank you very much. I think your 3 minutes is up. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Bailey.
Good morning, Chair and councillors.
Morning. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you. Well, obviously the application is for two principal aspects, as Mr. Rose explained earlier. The extension of the building, which we've worked with the officers, and we think we've got a very positive solution that adds to the character of the street scene and the quality of the building itself. Our clients are indeed intending to relocate to this property in the future, and therefore they want to do it to a high standard. With regards to the ground floor, the right-hand side is 15 square metres, which we've discussed is a very small retail space. The left-hand side is 33 metres, which is again small. But we've looked at the design so that that space can be kept and flipped back to any form of use in the future should the demand arise. The commercial spaces have been used over the past 10 years by 6 different occupiers, interspersed with periods of vacancy, and this indicates that there's not been many not many businesses being able to survive there. The property has been marketed for 12 months, starting before the pandemic came in, and whilst the loss of retail is regrettable, the situation simply echoes the long-term national trends. We've had advice from different consultants on this, all saying the same thing, and this trend was established before the pandemic and unfortunately has been accelerated by it. Beer's lost several businesses recently, obviously Treasure Chest, mentioned by Mr. Rose, Simple English Kitchens, and more recently Steamers, a 60-seat restaurant, has disappeared. In addition, Wandle, the former hairdressers just south of the site, is now being marketed to Cartagenus. The current layout on the particular shows that the linkages between the living space and the first floor accommodation goes through the shop. And the shop frontage there has 2 glazed windows that are completely obscure glazed. Not sure what's happening with that business, but I think it's probably going to be marketed for some other use. Notwithstanding all of the wider evidence and context, our clients have ensured that through the design process, should the demand for retail space occur, the larger 2 spaces can be readily switched to this use. It's been fully detailed in the design access statement how that could happen, and indeed consideration of partial retention has been discussed with the ward councillor, Councillor Booth, and a case officer. Also, you may be aware that from the government's housing press release on 31st of March, it appears that from the 1st of August this year, a new use order, Class MA, will come into effect, enabling
30 seconds remaining.
Of commercial spaces, Class E, which this is currently, to residential use on a prior approval notice, which does change the game significantly post-August. I therefore respectfully request that members support this recommendation and approve the application. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Right, Councillor Pook, ward member, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite happy to actually go straight into committee because I think I can say more then. So, unless there's any, I think I'm probably the last speaker. Do you want to go straight into committee and let me speak as a committee member?
Yeah, you can have as long as you like.
Oh, that's a surprise.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for letting me speak. And you've obviously heard the the passion from Annie Bolsh as a resident. But this application is opposed by the parish council and the community, not on design grounds, but because it will result in the loss of another commercial property in the village, which in turn harms the very character and vibrancy of the village. The essential character that visitors and residents treasure, and is probably the reason why the applicants purchased the property in the first place. The potential loss of retail space at this time is even more disheartening, as the parish council is embarking on an exciting economic revival plan for the village and has recently appointed Hemingway Design to review the tourist, economic and community opportunities in the village, incorporating the soon-to-be transferred assets. The application goes against the neighbourhood plan and against the local plan, as both these oppose the loss of commercial space, except in extenuating circumstances and after prescribed and exhaustive marketing process has proved that further commercial use is unviable. The officer report states that the marketing information provided is the minimum required to satisfy policy. The marketing that took place was for sale of a complete property. There is no such evidence to show that retail units were explicitly marketed for rent as retail units by the current or the previous owners in the past 3 years. The retail units have a good history, being on Fore Street in the village with other retail and commercial properties around them, both above and below. A unit less than 30 metres from these was recently taken on for rent by a new tenant, Chocolate and More, and I recommend you go there, and is providing successful enterprise in spite of COVID restrictions and is looking forward to a busy summer and winter trade. Anecdotally, as Annie Bolsh said, I have been told of people who are looking for retail units and beer. I therefore contest strongly that rental by the owner as a retail unit is not possible or viable. I therefore ask, if evidence of marketing is to be put forward, it should be complete, relevant, and by that I mean for rental, not for sale, and recent, not in the past, and also especially considering the recent past of COVID. And not, as this report says, the minimum to satisfy policy. Beer in East Devon deserves the better, and the minimum to satisfy policy, which is not good enough. Having said that, I can empathise with the owner of a property that is not fulfilling its potential or providing what the owner wants. The best result for the village and the owner is surely to have vibrant, profitable businesses in both units, preserving the character of the village and giving the owner the financial return he anticipated when purchasing the shops. My preference would there be to see both units remain as retail. However, it must be accepted that while the left-hand unit benefits from additional space at the back, the right-hand unit, if let separately, would have impinge on the living quarters for additional facilities. The applicant's architect stated at a meeting that the left-hand unit with a traditional shop front could be standalone and allow the applicant to return to retail in the future if they decided they wanted to. I've discussed this option of amending the application to retain the left-hand unit with the architect, and my understanding was that the amendment was going to be submitted to this meeting. This is something that I believe could be accepted on grounds of pragmatism, if not fully compliant with policy or local preference. If the application is refused, then this could come forward as an amended application in the future. So in the absence of the amendment, we have to consider the proposal in front of us on the basis that it does not comply with policy requirements relating to the loss of retail space and resultant damage to the village. Repeating my earlier statement, the primary justification by the officers is the provision of marketing information. That is the minimum required to satisfy policy. East Devon is renowned for its country villages and its coast. Beer is its only working fishing village in the district. A village needs diversity, and residents and visitors need facilities. These include the beach, the fishing, the pubs, the restaurant, and the shops. Are Beer in East Devon to be shortchanged into losing one of these elements by the minimum complying evidence required to satisfy policy? Beer residents say no, and if yes, then at least let us have some really relevant marketing about evidence. And of course, if the decision is to refuse, there's nothing to stop the applicant coming back with amended plans as suggested. So I know it's straight into the debate, but I confirm it's my recommendation to refuse, and I would like the committee to do the same. So I would like to propose refusal at this early stage.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Yes, I will, Chair. I'll second that.
Thank you. Right, we have a number of speakers. Councillor Coleman.
Sorry, who's seconding, Chair? Sorry.
Sorry, did I?
Sorry, Councillor Skinner. Who's seconding it? You didn't say.
Is there a seconder, please?
Yeah, me, Councillor Skinner. Is that
thank
right?
you. Okay, that's fine. Would you like to speak on it, Councillor Skinner?
Yes, and I'm going to be very brief, because I think the way that Councillor Pook has set out his stall has been absolutely excellent. Oh, there's a radio on. Is somebody? So on that basis, what is absolutely fundamentally important for places like beer, and Councillor Pook has already spoken on it, so I don't intend to waffle on about it, but it's really important that facilities are kept in place, and particularly shops in an environment like beer. Beer is quite unique to lots of the places of our towns and villages of where we live, and we are constantly fighting against the battle of retaining shops. And on that basis, I'm going to very much support Councillor Pook, and I feel very passionate about this. And actually, when you take the motion or the points put forward by Mr. Rose, I think Mr. Rose even agrees that this is finely balanced. And I think officers on the recommendation of going forward there, a bit of and ah and the rest of it. So I think what I would like to do, and I'm going to support this, and I'm going to support Councillor Pook in his recommendation of refusing this application, and we'll see where we go with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Coleman next.
Yeah, I also want to express my support for local shops. I'm very concerned over the recent years how many local shops have closed and changed to residential accommodation. I think local shops provide a very important contribution to the community. They allow people to get what the goods and services without having to drive long distances by car and all the associated pollution. I think it's important we protect this kind of local shop. I think as for the 12 months of putting on the market, I don't think you can regard it as valid at all because of COVID. And I believe COVID has changed all the rules. People have changed their lifestyles all around. Sorry, people have changed their lifestyles all around the country because of COVID. So I don't think you can go by past results of this 12-month thing. So I'm minded to support the motion to refuse.
Thank you. Now, unless you have something new to say, can you take your hand down, please? Just leave it up if you've got some additional information or something new to say. Councillor Key.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, I fully support that there. Also, I mean, I think what beer does have a problem with in actual fact, I mean, we don't want these holiday lets there. I mean, is the fact of course, the second homes in beer, which, I mean, Councillor Pook will only know too well. But also what does support the village of Beer is the large caravan site up there at Southdown. And I think that is a great thing. We've heard all the way through, in actual fact, that now, I mean, these big towns are looking forward to when the COVID is lifted to actually support more of the shops that are in there. And this is why I don't think we want to lose any shops in these tiny, smaller places like Colleton and Beer and Axminster. I mean, Axminster have sort of opened up some, and I think it's very, very important that we don't lose these little shops in there because they are supporting the village and the local people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Key. Over to you, Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Before I go to the motion to refuse, could I please just have members' clarification of the reasons for refusing and which policies they are relying upon for that?
Jeff Cook here. The reason, the policies, you can get the correct numbers, but it's all to do with the loss of commercial properties. And should there be an application, then it should be a proper and extensive fully recorded marketing process to prove non-viability.
So it's,
and we don't believe this has happened in this case.
Shall I help?
Yes, please, Chris, you've got better words than
Yeah,
me.
so if we obviously subject to the final wording being delegated to us, I think it's contrary to strategy 32 and E14 of the local plan, VPO2 of the villages plan, and then B1 and H4 of the neighbourhood plan. And in effect, what we're saying is it's inadequate marketing due to the time it's been carried out and its nature, which then leads to an unjustified loss of the retail units with a harmful impact on the vitality and viability and character of the town centre. So along those lines.
Perfect,
Oh,
Chris.
well done, Chris. That puts it. That really was very good. Right, Mrs. Shaw, is that okay for you?
Does the seconder, Councillor Skinner, accept those reasons for refusal as well?
So I was putting my thumb up saying, yes, absolutely brilliant. Well done. Crack on.
Thank you. Therefore, members, with the exact wording delegated, could I please have, when your name is called, whether you indicate your support for the motion to refuse, you're against the motion to refuse, or whether you're abstaining from the vote. Thank you.
Councillor Bloxham.
Support the motion to refuse.
Councillor Brown.
Support the motion to refuse.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Support the motion to refuse.
Councillor Coleman.
Support the motion to refuse.
Councillor Davey.
Support refusal.
Councillor De Saran.
Support refusal.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support refusal.
Councillor Howe.
Support refusal.
Councillor Key.
Support refusal.
Councillor Pook.
Support refusal.
Councillor Pratt.
Support refusal.
Councillor Skinner.
Support refusal.
Councillor Whibley.
Support refusal.
Councillor Woodward, sorry.
Support refusal.
Councillor Ragg.
Support refusal.
Thank you. I can confirm the vote to refuse has unanimously been carried.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you to the speakers for coming along. Thank you. Right, now we go to item 12, for which I will leave the chair as it's an application in my ward. Thank you. Over to you, Vice Chair.
Chair, we're on item 9.
Yes, sorry,
Oh,
agenda item 9. Can do it if you want, but you can carry on.
No, wait a minute. Oh,
Agenda item 9.
Yes, sorry, I scrolled down too far.
No worries.
Application 2016-80 full application and 2016-77 full, Bridge Farm, Stoke Cannon, page 40. Right, Chris, can you present your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so we've got 2 applications covered in this one report. They're 2 adjoining general purpose farm buildings, and the applications here because there's objection from the ward member. So on the screen there is the first of the buildings, and then I flick on, you can see the second of the buildings. So next to each other on the same part of the farm, and they are traditional agricultural buildings, timber above the concrete lower parts, and for storage of agricultural goods, as I'll mention in a minute. So you've got the main farm complex here, and then you have this area of sort of hard standing used as association with the farm here, and it's on this bit where the buildings are proposed, and we have previously granted further agricultural buildings up here for livestock, whereas this is not for storage of livestock. So we've got the first building there, and then the second building, so you can see that they adjoin each other. And here's the aerial of the site, so you can see the extent of the farm here, the main road here, and then this area where they are proposed next to the farm. These are views looking back, so you will view the buildings in association with the farm, but you can see there's lots of planting around that will screen the site. And again, this is an older one, but this is a view of the access, and the buildings will be screened by this boundary treatment. And then further up, looking down, the buildings are set down in the valley there. And again, there's further planting. So there are listed buildings in the area and a listed bridge, but nothing that will be impacted harmfully by this proposal. We've got 2 buildings of exactly the same size, so 456 square metres. They're approximately 20 metres by 20 metres at 9 metres in height. So in terms of the principle of development, as you know, Policy D7 supports agricultural buildings where there's a genuine agricultural need. These buildings are for new dry and secure storage for the 380-acre farm, and the applicant has provided a justification for the need for those buildings, and this is particularly related to expansion of the business, size of the farm, and the fact that these current buildings on the site are dated and are of a poor condition. They certainly date back a number of decades and not fit for modern purposes. And they are modernising and investing in the farm. One of the buildings would be for storage of straw and hay, and the other would be for dry storage, bulk and bag feed, and also for goods and vehicles and machinery. So they provided adequate justification in terms of the need for these buildings and their location immediately adjacent to the farm in accordance with Policy D7. You'll see from the report, and there has been issues, this farm on at least 2 occasions previously has taken digest from anaerobic digester plant at Enfield Farm, and that has been contrary to a condition on the anaerobic digester site saying that lists the farms that can take that digestate. Now, as I understand it, the owner wasn't aware that they weren't allowed to receive digestate from that AD plant, and we've been in discussions with them and the AD plant about that and enforcement action over that. And we have been advised that that will now cease and they will no longer receive any of that digestate at this farm. But there are wider concerns here from the community that what's happening at this farm in relation to AD plants and the increase in traffic. But as I say, it's been confirmed, and we are conditioning that these buildings can't be used for any digestate. And if it were to receive any further digestate from the anaerobic digester plant, then that would be contrary to a condition, and we could take enforcement action against that. So that aside, the applicant has demonstrated the need for these buildings, so that principle is justified and established. And in terms of the visual impact, they're large buildings, but they are farm buildings, as I say, timber in appearance, next to the existing farm buildings. There's planting proposed as well, and so there's no wider landscape harm from the buildings. Again, there have been some concerns raised about highways, but that's been linked to those movements that happened a couple of times over the last year from the anaerobic digester plant. They should now cease. And in any case, even with those movements, having spoken to the Highway Authority, they weren't concerned about the levels of traffic movements on those sites. So there's no justification or that we could make for refusal on highway safety terms. So hopefully now that anaerobic digester use has ceased, certainly the applicant's now aware that they can't receive that, and we are got constant monitoring of the AD plant to ensure that no digestate goes to this farm going forward. So given that these 2 farm buildings are unrelated to it, and we can condition that they can only be used for the storage of the bulk and goods that they've justified, we're recommending approval of both applications with conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Now we have the agent. Is he there yet? Have you managed to get him back, Sarah?
I have, Chair, yes, Mr. Dyson.
Oh, right. Right, Mark Dyson, welcome to the meeting. You have 3 minutes.
Chair, Mr. Dyson's on mute at the moment.
Oh, right.
I think he maybe appeared to be having problems.
Okay. Still on mute?
Yeah, sorry, I haven't got the function to unmute him. I can only ask him to unmute. So, Mr. Dyson, if you can hear me, are you able to unmute? Unfortunately, he's he's not unmuting. So whether he can't hear me or he's having problems. Sorry, Chair.
Oh, we cannot hear the meeting, he says.
Yeah. So he's trying to sort
Trying
it
to
out.
sort it out.
I'll just send him a message on the chat just to say it may be advisable to leave and then come back in, just to sort of
Yeah,
sort
shall we
things
give
out.
him
So,
another minute then to do that?
yeah, I'll just send him a message.
Okay.
Chairman,
hello.
Could I ask Mr. Rose how big the farm is? Does he know?
Yes, it's 380 acres.
Thank you.
Right, Mr. Dyson is now on his phone. And Mr. Dyson, can you hear me okay?
I can, yes, thank you for the hit. Sorry for the hitch.
Okay, welcome to the meeting, Mr. Dyson. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair and members. I'm Mark Dyson, the applicant's planning agent. As we have made clear, as recorded in the officer's report, the buildings proposed intended to equip this 380-acre holding with suitable modern facilities so that the next generation can farm successfully at Bridge Farm. The previous landlords had not invested properly in the farm buildings for many decades, and I, for one, welcome these improvements as a sign of confidence in the future of farming in general in the district. We have justified the use of the buildings to the council's satisfaction and have accepted the conditions proposed by officers restricting the use of the buildings to dry storage of materials, including hay, straw, feed, and machinery, etc. The farm is now the base of a fine suckler herd managed by the applicant's son, Max Parr, who eventually will be taking on the farm on his own account. The council have also accepted that the existing buildings, which are some 50 years old or older, are not suitable by design or condition for modern agricultural practices and are subject to ingress of surface water runoff. In fact, the size of the new buildings are within the holdings permitted development limits and therefore cannot be considered to be excessive. Concern has been raised that these buildings will in some way be connected with the storage and spreading of digestate from the Enfield AD plant on the east side of Exeter. The buildings are not suitable for the storage of any liquid materials, and the applicant asks that members are reassured that the future uses of buildings will be unconnected to the storage and spreading of such digestate. The restrictions, the applicant has made undertakings to this effect to officers in writing, Also, the restrictions in the proposed condition 4 are fully accepted. In fact, the storage of dry materials on site for the suckler herd will reduce the number and duration of vehicle movements over the winter months, as feed and materials currently have to be delivered regularly from elsewhere. Such vehicle movements access the farm from the A369 and not through any minor lanes in the area. I therefore hope you can support these applications as the necessary farming improvements that I know them to be. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Dyson. Ward member, Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. If I can take you back to the original statement I made, the objection I made in September, I suggest it is necessary to know whether the application actually proposes to support a wider commercial, agricultural and/or transport operation. It would present a very different set of issues concerning traffic and highways, plus environmental risk assessments, which are only out of scope for so long as we look no further than the text in the application. I really appreciate the consideration that has been given to this by both the applicant's agent and by Chris Rose, and they have provided some conditions in condition number 4 to try and to cater for this objection. I want to just give a bit of background as to why I am raising this on behalf of many residents in Exe Valley. For example, it's to do with the digestate industry. The Valuation Office Agency is now in touch with 572 anaerobic digester operations in England with a question set, 20 questions, to decide whether they are in fact running a business as opposed to the on-farm objective of reducing the farm's carbon footprint. If they're found to be running an industry instead, then they will be subject to business rates. The reason is that so many of these have grown beyond an on-farm operation to a business servicing a wider scenario. And this is because capital grants for plant, 50% subsidy for maize, advantageous feed-in tariffs for biogas or electricity generation, red diesel for networking feedstocks, digestate, etc., across the countryside, definitely across parts of Devon, well in excess of local agricultural needs. This development of anaerobic digestion as an industry is signalled by the operation being owned by venture capitalists based in the Cayman Islands, etc. I mean, good for them, good for the owners, fantastic business, but the impact is on our country lanes. Indeed, if I can draw your attention to Strategy 7 about the industry in the countryside, developments for industry in the countryside giving rise to increases in traffic is not favoured. One cannot bring that into play here because every single step of the way for the development of this industry has been a slice of salami, and each slice has had to be considered in its own right. No one has really considered the sausage. That is a matter that's being raised at the moment in several fields. Now, getting more closely to Bridge Farm, it is owned by the contractor who has the transport contract for the anaerobic digester at Enfield, specifically the Down family business. Many Exe Valley residents have complained to me about the problems in their villages and surrounding areas. Incidentally, the operations go beyond just Enfield. Mr. Parr has transport contracts with other digesters elsewhere in the county and beyond. For example, Willand in further north of here. The scale of, if you look at the records, the recent records of at the Weybridge between 1st September 2020 and 24th April this year, under the name of Parr, there have been 230 loads, over 4,000 tons taken out, and the large pond, which you will see on the map, is used for storing digestate, and I have been told by one of the transport operators that when it is full, they have to wait around a bit in order to transfer digestate to other tankers. Okay, that's operational, so be it. But I just want to draw attention to the size of the operation and how much transport takes place in the villages around there.
30 seconds remaining.
So what I request is that we've had 500 signatories from 14 villages sign a petition about this. It is a large-scale objection. In conclusion, I want another dozen words added to condition 4 to make this more acceptable. That is that at the end of the first sentence, we have also machinery used in the transport of the same. In other words, we do not want the storage of the machinery used in the road transport of this digestate stored in these farms or maintained there, because already the farm is a magnet for this traffic, and to have machinery stored there will just exacerbate the situation. And
5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. I know that I've had a number of conversations with Councillor King, not about this application, but about the problem of digestate being transported and the heavy vehicles which move around that area. There is considerable local concern about it. And I know this because I've had contact from one of the parish councillors as well. So, right. We have a number of speakers. Councillor Howe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really, as a point of clarity, I needed to raise this because Enfield Farm has been spoken about a number of times. It is in my ward and is a concern of mine, but nevertheless is not part of this application for various reasons. We are looking at a farm, but not Enfield Farm. But as I say, Enfield Farm, as everyone keeps talking about it, is in my ward, and I need to make that clarity. Thank you.
Thank you. And do you have any comments on the application?
It's really hard, isn't it? Because we've been drawn down a discussion on anaerobic digestion when this application is not about anaerobic digestion. So I am struggling to agree with the ward members' comments. I am also sit here, going, if the farmer can well use this machinery, the same machinery, in his own business, in his own farm, and as such, I can't see the difference of excluding some farm machinery from a farm to not others, sort of thing. So I'm going to put a stamp on this, and I'll recommend approval as per officer's recommendation.
Seconded, Chair.
But I do have a question for Mr. Rose, which is a sort of a side question as to why 2 applications, not 1. Thank you very much.
Through to you, Chair. I don't know if this is the case, but usually in these circumstances, we get 2 applications, not 1, because it makes the application fee smaller for the applicant.
That was what I expected. I just wanted the committee to understand that and realise what's going on. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Right, I think, was it Councillor Key?
No, Councillor DeSarum seconded, Chair.
Councillor DeSarum, then, sorry, I can't see all of you on my
screen. No, I understand, Chair. Not a problem. I was going to say that the applicant's words, Mike Dyson's words, convinced me, because he quite clearly categorically said that we were going to have dry storage of materials such as hay and machinery. The buildings are 50 years or older and they're unsuitable for modern agriculture, and it falls into line with what we discussed this morning under the charred stock one, where we were helping the business survive, because it said this is an expansion of the business and it's basically for going forward for family things. I note the problems with the anaerobic digestive, but we have clearly put a condition on that, and Mr. Rose said this is not going to happen, and I would believe that our conditions will be suitable. So for that reason, I'm happy to support what Councillor Howe has proposed.
Thank you. And just to remind members that Mr. Rose also said if the conditions weren't adhered to, it would be followed up with enforcement action. So, Councillor Skinner, is there anything new to add?
Well, to be honest, Chair, I thought I may have found that first, to be honest, but obviously you're picking them out as you wanted. But on that basis,
Well, if I
think,
could say, I asked Councillor Howe because I know that it was adjoining his ward. That's why. And I thought for information gathering, all right?
Yeah, it's not adjoining his ward. He's down Cliswick.
Well,
Mary, but
he does have it, as he said, he has some knowledge of what's been happening out there, and I know he's had conversations, I believe, with Councillor King. So I thought it would help inform the committee. All right.
That's fine. That's fine. Just moving on. I see. I think lots of things have been said, but I think what I'm going to very much support is the fact that I think the officers have made a proper recommendation. I think it, as far as Councillor King thinking that having the vehicles moving, I think Councillor Howe covered that one slightly from the fact that the vehicles shouldn't be used, although they're farm vehicles and predominantly farm vehicles. So I'm going to very much be supporting the application. I'm sure. Was there a motion put? Was there a motion put forward? Sorry, was there something put forward to Mr. Rose that Mr. King put forward something like adding something to the conditions, and that was about the farm vehicles? Was that being taken forward? Because wouldn't be supporting that if it was. Just to be clear, that with Mr. Rose.
Well, through you, Chair, my understanding is that Councillor Howe's recommendation wasn't to include that wording.
Good, that's fine. Then that's good. Okay, I'm fine. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Key. Councillor Key.
Sorry, I was muted. Just very, very quickly, I mean, I can quite see the reason why they wanted these buildings a little bit away from it, because if they're going to be sort of housing straw and hay, then should there be a fire, it's away from livestock, which I think is very, very sensible idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard.
Thank you, Chair. Now, my points have been raised, Chair, but I'm very pleased to see clause action point number 4 that's going to be condition that's going to be put in, so I shall be supporting. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Members, we have 2 applications with the same recommendations that have been moved by Councillor Howe and Councillor de Sarum. If I can take the 201680 full application first, and that is to approve subject to the conditions as listed in the report. Please, when your name is called, would you indicate whether you support the motion to approve, you're against the motion to approve, or whether you're abstaining from the vote.
Councillor Bloxham.
Support the motion to approve.
Councillor Brown.
Support motion to approve.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Support the motion to approve.
Councillor Coleman.
Support.
Councillor Davey.
Support approval.
Councillor de Sarum.
Support motion to approve.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support.
Councillor Howe.
Support.
Councillor Key.
Approve.
Councillor Pook.
Support.
Councillor Pratt.
Support.
Councillor Skinner.
Support.
Thank you. Councillor Whibley.
Support.
Councillor Woodward.
Support.
Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
Thank you. The vote to approve is carried.
Thank you, Chair, through you. If we can now move on to the second application that also has the motion to approve subject to the conditions as listed. Members, please, when your name is called, would you indicate whether you're in support of the motion to approve, whether you're against the motion to approve, or whether you're abstaining from the vote.
Councillor Bloxham.
Support the motion to approve.
Councillor Brown.
Support approval.
Councillor Chamberlain,
Support approval.
Councillor Coleman,
Support.
Councillor Davey,
Support approval.
Councillor Desaran,
Support motion to approve.
Councillor Gazzard,
Support.
Councillor Howe,
Support.
Councillor Key,
Approve.
Councillor Pook,
Support.
Councillor Pratt,
Support.
Councillor Skinner,
Support.
thank you, Councillor Whibley,
Support.
Councillor Woodward,
Support approval.
Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
Thank you, and that vote is carried as well.
Right, now, next one is in the town ward, so I will hand over the chair to Vice Chair, Councillor Chamberlain.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So next we move on to agenda item 12, application number 20/2393/full 27 Parade Exmouth. This can be found on page 87. I would like to welcome to the meeting Joshua Pigeon, the applicant. But first of all, I would like to go over to Chris to present his report.
Thank you. So yeah, this is quite a simple application, subdivision of an existing masonette to provide 2 flats, and it's here because there's ward member support. So we're right in the town centre, the heart of Exmouth here. And these are the layouts. We've got a ground floor here, a shop unit, and then a lounge area at the rear. And then you go upstairs to accommodation, and you can see the layout. And then the proposal is very small extension on the back here. That then creates a unit at ground floor, and then it allows the upstairs to be used as a separate unit. So then you create, keep the retail unit, flat at ground floor, flat at first floor. And here's the unit. So you'll see in the report, principle of residential development in the town centre is acceptable. There's no impact on the shop, but we've got this issue of the site being within flood zone 3, and there's the flood map. And as you know, if we're in flood zone 3, applicants have to go through the sequential test and be able to demonstrate there's no land in flood zone 1. There is land available to develop in flood zone 1 in the district, so therefore the application would fail the sequential test, and is therefore contrary to the NPPF and policy EN 21 that states we should refuse development where it fails the sequential test, because you're just adding more residential development into flood zones, which has all sorts of insurance and pressures on emergency services, etc. There's no other wider harm from the proposal, so the recommendation is to refuse because the site's located within the flood zone and the failure of the sequential test contrary to the NPPF and policy EN 21 of the local plan. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rose. Next, we have Joshua Pigeon, the applicant, to speak. You have 3 minutes to speak when you're ready.
Joshua, you're on mute at the moment.
Is that better?
Lovely.
Yeah, that's brilliant. We can
Yeah,
hear you
thank
now.
you
You
very
have
much.
3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. So obviously, my name's Josh. To support the application, there's a new seawall obviously being built, costing like £30 million, which then will lower our flood risk dramatically. The self-contained flat is affordable housing for the town. It's a nice 1-bed studio apartment. The building has always been there. Even in the 60s, when the flooding did happen, it never reached that point. The parade, where the shop is situated, is the highest point of the parade. There's the pumping station behind the building, which is Southwest Water, which is meant to take away any excess water. It's just, the height of the difference is dramatic, quite a lot. You can see that on the drawings from the back of the building. And obviously there's a bike store, so we're trying to make sure we have save help the environment by having people riding to work and cycling to work, and it would be obviously somebody's home for a long time, which the town obviously needs. Yeah, I'm in it for the long haul, and I think it will, once the test obviously changes in months, obviously our flood risk will be a lot lower, and the building's always been there. It's more money for the council, and never council tax, which the government I'm sure will be appreciative of. And it's just, yeah, it stands itself to have a one-bedroom apartment there. Any questions or anything?
I don't believe there's any at this precise moment, but if we go on to the committee ward members, it may be that they. Oh yes, of course.
Thank you. You've stated that obviously we all know about the flood prevention works.
Yeah.
But you've stated that the flood risk will lower.
Yes.
Have you had a quote from the Environment Agency to that effect? Because they just don't lower it.
Even though the seawall is obviously going to differentiate the water from obviously coming into the parade.
Correct.
Yeah.
They never lower the flood risk.
They won't.
No.
I was under the impression that they were.
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Because they always work on the point of failure of the seawall. And as such, you'd still be in a flood zone. So
okay.
I just wanted to make sure whether you'd had clarification that they were going to.
No.
It's unheard of, if you get my meaning. All
right. Okay. Thank you much for your help.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howe. I don't know if anybody else has any questions that they'd like to make at this point to Joshua, or whether we move on now to ward members. Okay, if we move on to ward members next. First of all, I have Councillor Davey, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm probably going to go out on a limb again here. And I assure you, I'm not making policy on the hoof, but I do wonder who draws up these maps. One side of the parade is much lower than the other, and I will accept that the other side of the parade was much more at risk of flooding than this side. As you can see, it's several steps up, and there's a couple of feet there in difference. So I just find it very hard to accept that this is in a major flood zone. And I know we've talked about pressure on the emergency services and so on, but anybody who lived in that flat would have plenty of warning and time to get out, because the water that would rise would have a considerable way to go before it actually reached that apartment. As has been stated, the building is already there. It's a very small extension. The problem arises because it's subdividing it. If it was simply extending the existing property, that perhaps wouldn't be a problem, but it is the fact that it will then be subdivided and creates a separate dwelling. But this is in a highly sustainable location. It's right by a bus stop. There's cycle storage. You're 5 minutes walk from the train station. And I support development in town centres because they are so sustainable. So on this occasion, I understand the sequential test, I understand the flood maps, but I just find it very hard to accept that this area is prone to flooding. I appreciate that the flood defences are there to cope with sea level rise, so they perhaps will not impact on the danger of flooding. But I have never seen this area flood, so I think it just seems very difficult to accept that this is in a flood zone. And in all other respects, I think it's perfectly acceptable and sustainable application. I'm happy to support it.
I'll second that.
Chair, you're muted, I'm afraid.
I'm very sorry. Thank you very much. Shirley, we're in committee ward members, so can we take proposals now, or do we have to wait until we go into full committee?
Planning
Normally you take the speakers first and then move
Yeah.
questions
That's-
and then move.
I was
into
just checking.
the
Yeah,
debate.
thank you. That's fine. So next we move on to Councillor Whibley. Thank you.
Cheers, thank you. Just to say that I was at the planning meeting of Exmouth Town Council when this was discussed. Although they haven't sent anybody, I think pretty much what I say represents what they said. With regards to the report and the bicycle space, there's a courtyard, I believe, which, although not designated as such, could be as bicycle space. Given that we do now have very expensive flood prevention work nearing completion, whether or not the flood zones or not are redrawn, I think it's such a shame that good quality, affordable development and living space is being hamstrung by sequential tests when around this area and throughout the town, other developments of a much, much bigger scale are being granted. I think if we don't grant this application permission, I think we lose out on 2 quality units, whereas at the minute, I believe they're bed sits. Exmouth Town Centre is crying out for this kind of accommodation. This will, although not meeting the sequential test, as has been said before, the building's there already. It doesn't add a significant extra risk, and it will provide exactly the sort of accommodation that we want. And the sequential test, I understand why it's there, but the idea that somebody who owns a building and wants to make it better will then go, oh, well, I'll go somewhere else where there isn't a flood risk because of the sequential test is ludicrous. I don't know. And as I say, if you look at the scale of this development in comparison to the large development behind this row of shops, which was granted planning permission a few years ago, but is yet to be built, this is tiny. Yeah, I think, and the other one is you have to assess everything on its own merits, and you can't prejudge whether or not there will be any flood risk reassessment. But we had the Bank Number 9 development last year, where it was very controversial, but in the end, we decided to accept with conditions a large development that was in an area that does flood all of the time. Sort of, I don't know, 2 or 3 times in the past 5 years, if memory serves. I think common sense and consideration of the circumstances of this particular application and its scale would warrant acceptance of this application, I think. I'd be interested to see what other ward members think. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Whibley. Next, we move on to Councillor Ragg.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Chris, please, about the development at the back of New Street. I think it was 17 flats, and New Street is just yards away behind the parade. So I'd like to ask Chris about that. Why was that allowed to go ahead?
Okay, so through you, Chair, so officers recommended refusal of that scheme on the basis that it was in the flood zone.
Yeah.
But committee determined to approve it on the basis of the benefits from the 1-bed units, because we know there's a shortage and a need for 1-bed units in Exmouth in particular, but also on the basis that it was providing, I can't remember if it was 30, might have even been 40% affordable housing associated with it. So the committee felt that the combination of that affordable housing and the 1-bed units outweighed that harm from being in the flood zone.
Right, thank you. And the one at 6 Alston Terrace, that one was refused, if I remember, although there was support for it, but it was refused. Did that one go to appeal? Can you remember, Chris? And was the appeal dismissed?
I can't recall it going to appeal, no.
No. Okay. Well,
if I can interject there, Chair, I think it did go to appeal. I think I followed that application quite closely, and I seem to remember the appeal did uphold the refusal, actually.
Yes, that's what I thought. So, these things are there for a reason. And I know we've got the 12 million tidal defence scheme going ahead, which will give protection. But all that land around there was formerly marshland before the colony was built. So it is reclaimed. But nonetheless, you know, as I have a lot of sympathy for this application, but as you're probably aware, I do tend to stick with policy. If you don't like it, change the policy. I know it's an Environment Agency diktat, but even so, you know, I can't support approval of this, and I'm sorry about that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wragg. We now move into the committee to discuss, and first of all on the list, I have Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Vice Chair. If perhaps, Mr. Rose, you could look at the flood plan again. I just have a query. Yeah, that one, because we've got the index on the right-hand side, and it says areas benefiting from flood defences, and none are shown. The flood defences on that side, well, all the way around now, have been completed, apart from the gates on the front. So I wonder whether that plan is actually representative of the current situation. There is no hatched area shown on that plan, which would show that area benefiting from flood defences. So that's a comment. Perhaps Chris could make a mention of that later. But I see, obviously, this is the sequential test applies, but I would see the provision of a one-bedroom flat in the centre of the town to be advantageous and would outweigh the issue about the sequential test. It's on raised ground, as I think everybody knows. The water used to come up the road there, and that was higher ground. That's why it's called the parade. So I would support the application going through. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't take myself off mute. Councillor Woodward, is that a proposal?
It is, yes.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
I will second that.
Is that Councillor Whibley?
It is, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So next on the list we have to speak Councillor De Sarum.
Thank you, Chair. As we've heard this morning, this would be of great benefit to the applicant, and I've noticed that when we looked at it before in other areas, such as Budley in the previous week, we spoke about the economic and tourist benefits if we went ahead and changed it. But I'm reminded of the fact that Councillor Howe spoke to us earlier this morning about this isn't the time and place to make changes to policy. And I think our chair spoke to us about that earlier this afternoon. So I really understand, and my heart goes out to the applicant, and I really feel for the applicant, because I think it is something we have to consider. But I think we can't go against what policy recommendations are, because that is the purpose, as I was reminded dutifully by Councillor Howe this morning, as to why we've got policies. So it is with great reluctance that I won't be able to support it for that reason. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor De Sarum. Next, we move on to Councillor Pook, please.
Thank you. I fully accept all the comments on the policy, and and we've already spoken how policy has to be complied with. But in this case, I think there's two possibly mitigating circumstances. The area, the ground floor, is already used for domestic use. I know this will be an additional unit, but it already has domestic use. If I'm reading the plans correctly, saying lounge, and therefore, are we really changing anything significant? And the comment that Councillor Woodward came up, areas benefiting from flood relief, flood defence, then surely whether we want to, this is almost certainly going to come into an area in future. I know this is just a position, so I'd like to consider that, but base my argument on the fact that it's already got domestic use down there, and I think it's relevant to support this because it will be bringing two low-cost houses right into the centre of a very sustainable location.
Thank you very much, Councillor Poop. Next, we move on to Councillor Howe, please.
Thank you very much. Where do I start and where do I finish? This is one of those tricky ones, and I believe it's tricky because of the report itself. We can't argue with the sequential test. This shouldn't be going there. New property shouldn't be going there. But there is buts to everything. There is a dire need for one-bedded flats in Exmouth, that we know. There's a dire need for one-bedded affordable flats in Exmouth, that much we know. So a possible exemption could be made. But this report does not help us particularly. Under the paragraph on page 91, Mr. Rose, and I'd like your thoughts on this, you've got flood risk and sequential test. Now, I've tried to read your report thoroughly, and all we concentrate on is the sequential test, which we all understand that it won't comply with the sequential test. But in my own ward and other places, there are areas of land that are slightly higher than others, where the flood risk should be assigned by means of flood prevention measures, height of floor, etc. But that detail isn't with this. Is there a possibility we can get that detail that would allow us to approve this, knowing the residents would be safe, would be out of the flood zone, because they are higher than the expected flood ingress if it happens, etc., 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 and can be mitigated by not having the electrics on the floor, by putting flood prevention measures on the doors, etc., because the risk would be lower because of the height above mean sea level that it might be. Because I haven't got that height measurements, I can't make that determination. I can't approve it in its current form, but I do believe information possibly could lead to show things being a safe development. But as I say, I'd look forward to Mr. Rose's comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howe. Chris, would you like to come back now, or would you like to come back at the end of all the speakers?
That's fine. Yeah. So where you want to make it, where you don't comply with a sequential test, and there are circumstances where you can depart from that, so it might be water compatible uses, that sort of thing, then we go through something called the exceptions test, and in effect that is in the detail that Councillor Howe is talking about. So we would then ask an applicant to provide us details of the floor levels, where the sockets are going to go, the electrics, so that we can, and the sort of materials that are going to be used, so that we can be sure that if a flooding event does occur, then the minimum damage happens because of a good design of the extensions and layout. So I suppose the answer to Councillor Howe's question is, if members wanted to make an exception to policy on the basis that this is providing those one-bed flats, we could put a condition on to secure those details in terms of the levels and sockets and materials that are being used for that extension in particular, to ensure that that is as flood resilient as it could be. If I just of course mention the map on the screen, it's the latest map from the EA. They will update it, no doubt, when, or hopefully when, the full flood defence scheme is finished in its entirety. But I think that will just indicate that this area is protected from flooding. It won't change or downgrade it from flood zone 3. It will remain in flood zone 3 for the reasons Councillor Howe made, that the Environment Agency work on the basis of caution, and that flood defence by nature can fail. So therefore, as a result of that, they tend to take sites out of a flood zone even when flood defence works have been put in place as a caution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Next, we move on to Councillor Gazzard, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, I should be supporting the application because I think it does need supporting. One, because, as it's already been said, it's in domestic use, and it is also providing affordable one-bedroom accommodation, which is urgently and needed in Exmouth. But obviously, as people know, the parade is higher than the floods that we've had before. And I mean, I can go back to the 60s, I can go back even before that, but the water's never got that high. So I understand the what Mr. Rhodes is saying about these sequential tests, but I think there are reasons why we can approve it, and my reasons would be that it's already been used for domestic use, and it's going to provide affordable housing, which is urgently needed in Exmouth. And obviously, as the applicant said, they are going to provide bike storage, which is good for the environment. So I'll be supporting the application, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gazzard. Next, we move to Councillor Wragg, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to inform the committee that New Street, which is the area I referred to before, which is at the rear of this place, we don't know the ground levels. We do know that the town centre is below sea level, and New Street has had properties flooded in recent years. It's at times of high rainfall and high tides, heavy rainfall, high tides, where surplus water can't get out into the Exe. And so it comes back up through people's houses. And we are in a time of climate change, rising sea levels. So flooding is going to be increased. There's no question of that. That's been scientifically proved. So I think those matters have to be taken into consideration as well. There is going to be an increased risk of flooding, not just here, but everywhere. But this is a low-lying area. Despite the steps going up to the parade, it is a low-lying area. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wragg. Next, we have Councillor Davey, please.
Yeah, I appreciate what Councillor Wragg is just saying, but I just want to say I think a lot of Exmouth would be underwater before this would flood. And if that was the case, then we got a major incident anyway. And I'm inclined to support this because I think on this occasion, there is a need for this type of single bed accommodation. It's not a new building, it's mainly a conversion of an existing building. If this was a kind of speculative 4-bedroom house in a flood zone in the middle of nowhere, then I would have no hesitation in refusing it. But I think given all other factors, the sustainable location, that the fact that it's a type of accommodation we know is needed, and the fact that it mainly consists of conversion of an existing building, then I continue to be happy to support it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davey. Next, we have Councillor Woodward.
Yes, I was just coming back on a comment that was made before that we should be following the policies and the test. But if that was the case, then Mr. Rose could sit by himself and there'd be no need for a committee. So that's why we're here, to look at the exceptions and make a balanced judgment. So again, I'm just repeating that I would support the application and for all the reasons that other people have said in favour of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Woodward. Next, we have Councillor De Saran, please.
Sorry, thank you very much, Chair. My last question was because Councillor Howe and Mr. Rose touched on it. Are we saying that if we would give permission to this today, it would meet the exceptions test? Because if it's going to meet the exceptions test, then I think I'm quite satisfied because clearly it has met some form of test. So could I ask Mr. Rose, are we still able to say that it's met the exceptions test, even though it's failed the sequential test? So would I be able to justifiably say that if I was going to change my mind on the basis of the exceptions test? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor De Saran. Chris, if you want to come back to that one.
No, we don't have the information in front of us to be able to say it will pass the exception test. I think what I was obviously badly trying to say was that if you did want to approve it, you could put a condition on to get as much details as we can to ensure that there are materials and sockets raised up, but that wouldn't take it out of the flood zone or make the property any less at risk of flooding. It would just mean that there would be less damage when it did flood.
Thank you very much, Chris. Next, I have Councillor Skinner to speak, please.
And I might just add, Mr. Rose, that maybe, sorry, I've seen them, maybe that when it does flood, or of course, if it did, of course, flood. So we have to bear that in mind. And I just chucked that one in there. I'm quite interested with this application. And could I just ask both Councillor Ragg and Councillor Gazzard, is the Paper Chase, did that used to be Parker's, the fruit and veg shop?
Oh, Edwards and Reese.
Parker's, the fruit and veg.
Yeah, Parker's, I think it did, yes.
Right. So, well, I need to declare a little interest then, because about 45 years ago, Jeremy Parker was my best friend. I used to go and stay there. So I sort of know the house a little bit. I thought it looked like it, but I wasn't absolutely sure. Now, I'm going to, I think on this one, I absolutely understand all the flood stuff and all of that. I think members have spoken very well talking about, I think there's big change between probably when the flood risk was done to when now we've got the wall up and all the rest of it. And I absolutely understand that mitigating circumstances have sort of changed the environment for me a little bit. I'm going to go with the members. I'm going to support this application in going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Skinner. And next I have Councillor Woodward to come back.
Right, I was just going to say if for the additional conditions, if that helps anybody who's wavering, then I'd be happy to attach that to the proposal.
I would be happy to second it in that state as well with that condition, definitely. That's
okay.
Right.
Okay. So we don't have, oh, no, we don't have anyone else to speak now. That's absolutely fine. So we have a proposer from Councillor Woodward and seconder Councillor Whibley to support approval. We'll go over to Mrs. Shaw, please, to sum up.
Thank you, Chair. Members, I have made a note that it is a motion to approve, the reason being the provision of a one-bedroom flat outweighs the flood zone concerns. Is that the reason that the proposer and seconder are happy to go with the exact wording delegated to Chris Rose to make it a bit more PC?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Therefore, I would also ask the mover and seconder whether they would delegate conditions in consultation with the chair and ward member with particular condition to approve materials, etc., to improve the flood resilience.
I'm happy to do that.
Yep, happy to do that.
Thank you very much. Therefore, members, you have the motion to approve. Please, when your name is called, would you indicate whether you're in support of the motion to approve, beg your pardon, against the motion to approve, or whether you're abstaining from the vote.
Councillor Bloxham.
Support the motion to approve.
Councillor Brown.
Refuse the motion.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Abstain.
Councillor Coleman.
Support the motion to approve.
Councillor Davey.
Support approval.
Councillor Dasaram.
Abstain.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support.
Councillor Howe.
Refuse.
Councillor Key.
Refuse.
Councillor Pook.
Support.
Councillor Pratt.
Support.
Councillor Skinner.
Support the motion to approve.
Councillor Whibley.
Support.
Councillor Woodward.
Support.
Councillor Ragg.
Against approval.
Thank you. I'll just do some quick maths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in support. 1, 2, 3, 4 against, 2 abstentions. I can confirm the vote to approve is carried.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Next, I will hand you back over to your chair for agenda item number 14. Thank you.
Thank you. Right.
Can we have a break?
Oh, sorry?
Can we have a break?
Yeah, 15 minutes.
Perfect.
1 o'clock then.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I'm going to leave the live stream running. So if everyone can mute, please.
Right, is everybody back?
Would you like me to do a quick roll call just to check?
Yes, please, Wendy.
Okay. Excuse me. Councillor Bloxham. Councillor Brown?
Yes, present.
Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain?
Present.
Councillor Coleman? Councillor Davey?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor De Sarum?
Present. Good afternoon, Wendy.
Good afternoon. Councillor Gazzard?
Good afternoon, Wendy, and present.
Thank you. Councillor Howe?
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Councillor Key?
Hello.
Hello. Thank you, Councillor Key. Councillor Pook?
Here, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Whibley?
Hello. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward?
Present and correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ragg?
Present.
Thank you. So I'll go back to Councillor Coleman.
Yeah, I'm back. Present.
Lovely. Thank you. And finally, Councillor Bloxham.
Yeah, present, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All present, and we are quorate for this afternoon's meeting.
Right, thank you, Wendy. Right, then we go to agenda item 14, application 21-0241, full Cliffside, Black Horse Lane, Black Horse, on page 105. And there's just the ward member, Councillor Rylance and Councillor Chamberlain to speak on this item. And it's before you because it's a departure from the local plan. Thank you. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this is application for a construction of 2 detached bungalows. As you say, Chair, it's a departure, which is why it's in front of you. Members may recall this site because they dealt. We had a previous application at committee just proposing the 1 bungalow on the site that members granted, and since then we've granted a change to the design of that scheme. Just making some elevational changes to it. So this is the site. You can see the relationship with surrounding properties, and it's key. And the reason that with the single dwelling was granted consent last time is because the site's located here, and you can see that it is therefore close to the 1,500 houses that have been consented around here at Tithe Barn and Moss Hayne, close to the science park, and I suppose more relevant, as part of the scheme adjoining the site here, there's recreational facilities and a local centre. So we're close to all of those facilities, and we're on the main cycle route and close to the other jobs and facilities in the area. And again, so this is the site. You can see Tithe Barn and Moss Hayne starting to be developed out. There'll be playing fields around here and a local centre, as I say. And this is the site at the moment, a bungalow in a very large plot. And the proposal is to put 2 bungalows next to it in the garden there, retaining the existing trees at the rear of the site. And these are the elevations of the bungalows, rendered tile roof and with some cladding. As I say, that's the elevation with a driveway in off the road that was previously to serve the single dwelling on the site. And there you've got a street view to show the size of those dwellings in association with the existing bungalow and a CGI of them. And the elevation and the aerials, this is a bit older, some of these trees at the front aren't there, but the trees at the back are there and are to be retained. And then we have the view from the street. So the site's up here to the right. So this is the application property, so the bungalows are further down there, so you can see, given the razor levels, they won't be highly prominent from this street area, so back in behind this fencing, and there's adequate distance to the rears to protect the amenity of resident properties. So you can see these properties are set quite a way back. So as I say, it's a departure, but given the location of the site right next to Tide Barn and Moss Hayne and the local centre and recreational facilities, the science park, the cycle park, previously the site was considered to be in a sustainable location for a single dwelling, and that's considered to be the case now for 2 dwellings. And as you can see, it will form a similar layout to these dwellings that are further along there in terms of continuing the building line and putting a couple of properties in. And therefore, in terms of the visual impact, it's going to be acceptable. As I said, it's set back from the street. It will be viewed in association with these dwellings. There are some trees to the boundaries. It will be in character of the area, and it's for good design. There's some windows between the properties that will face each other, but this is a single story, so there won't be any overlooking. And as I mentioned, there's a considerable distance to these properties at the rear. And again, we're dealing with bungalows. Again, as before, sustainable location, although it's for 2, not 1 bungalow this time. And they're of a decent size. It's very rare that we get schemes for bungalows, so I think that's a positive for this scheme as well. And with no wider harm, and given its good location, the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Chris. Right, Councillor Rylance, I see you're in the meeting. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
5 minutes to speak on this.
Oh, I won't need 5 minutes. I just wanted to ask you, even though this is a departure from the local plan and it is also outside the built-up village area boundary for Broadclist, to consider giving this application your support. Through the neighbourhood plan process at Broadclist, we have identified a need for single plan living. And as Chris Rose has just pointed out, this is it backs onto many walking areas, and there will be 1,500 houses just over the hedge, essentially, with all the infrastructure that comes with them. So, in my view, it would be a little churlish to turn this down, because they are going to be essentially living within the sort of development of Monkerton.
All right.
So. Can you hear?
You keep breaking up, Eleanor.
Hello?
Yeah, hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So I just wanted to say it is a departure from the local plan. I would ask you to look kindly on the report from Chris Rose with the conditions applied, which I do support, obviously, for retention of biodiversity and trees, but to consider granting this because it is very close to current development sites that will be really quite significant centres of habitation with all the infrastructure that goes with them. So that's really all I have to say. I
think you just disappeared again, Eleanor.
How much did you hear? Sorry.
Well, I think we heard what we needed to hear, I'm sure. Over to Vice Chair then, as the other ward member, Councillor Chamberlain.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, this is in my ward. It's obviously been before us before for 1 bungalow to be put on the site. It's now come forward with 2 bungalows. I really like that this has come forward as bungalows as opposed to big family houses for a change. You don't see many developments nowadays which do bring forward bungalows because of the space that they take up. I understand. This is a small development in this area, unlike the mass development that's going on around it. So I do support this, like Councillor Rylance in this area, and think it's quite in fitting with that area. I know it's a departure, but looking at the greater picture of it and the planned development completely around it, I can see more proposals coming forward from areas like this in the future. And I agree that this one fits in well with where it is. So that's all I have to say, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Right. Councillor Tesarum.
Thank you, Chair. I would support approval, although I am aware that it's going against the local plans, etc. But clearly, there is a need for bungalows, as the ward member identified, and the other ward member said there's a need for single plan living with good walking areas. It's visually okay, and so there's adequate protection. So it meets all those needs. So I will not hesitate to propose approval, and hopefully other members will also agree.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner, would you like to speak?
I think it's all been said. I'm just going to second that. We move on.
Not a lot to say, is there?
No, thank you.
Anything to add, Councillor Woodward?
No, I was going to support it or propose it, but some that's already been done, so I'm happy.
Okay. Councillor Howe?
Yeah, just very quickly, as neighbouring ward member of this, right across the road, I fully support this. But we do need to be clear to the committee of why this is a departure. Our local plan proposed various things, and subject to my speech earlier sort of thing, our local plan has overtaken things, and this is now an anomaly of that local plan. We should have foreseen it. We certainly didn't, but it's blatantly obvious. So Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Councillor Gazzard, have you anything new to add?
No, Chair, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members, you've got one motion, and that is to approve subject to the conditions as listed in the report. Please, when your name is called, indicate whether you support the motion to approve, whether you're against the motion to approve, or whether you're abstaining from the vote.
Councillor Bloxham.
Support the motion to approve.
Councillor Brown.
Support the motion.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Support.
Councillor Coleman.
Approve.
Councillor Davey.
Support approval.
Councillor de Sarum.
Support approval.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support.
Councillor Howe.
Support.
Councillor Key.
Approve.
Councillor Pook.
Support.
Councillor Pratt.
Support.
Councillor Skinner.
Support.
Councillor Whibley.
Support.
Councillor Woodward.
Support approval.
Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
That is unanimously carried.
Right, thank you. Hold on. Right. Hold on. Just lost my application. Oh.
Agenda item 13, Chair.
Yeah, I don't have it in my script. Oh, yes, I do. Tiny little piece. Okay. Page 95 of your papers. Application 1999, variation minor. And there are no speakers for this item, so over to you, Chris, to present, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this is an application for a variation of condition of an application that's already been granted, and it's before you because the application, our recommendation varies from a comment from the ward member. The original application was to demolish the existing dwelling, build a new dwelling on the site with a workshop store to the front. And this proposal is amending the design of that workshop and store, no changes to the locational design of the dwelling. So this is the layout. So the dwelling was moving from this corner into the center of the site, and the garage is proposed, store proposed at the front. So this is the scheme as proposed now, with this storage building at the front here. If I just move on, so you can see the garage here or store here. And if you can just make out this pink outline here, that was the originally approved garage and store to the building. So they want to replace with this one. And as we go through here, we can see the elevation of the building, the store in relation to the bungalow, and it's been turned so that the roof pitches away from the road. And here are the elevations. It's shown as metal clad, but the applicant has now agreed to a condition to make this timber clad to reduce its visual impact. And this is the scheme previously approved. You can see the store that way, and it's now proposed to be turned 90 degrees and put in this location. So the principles already have been established for the dwelling and the store on the site. It's a different workshop and store. The applicants advised that they want to be able to store their classic cars, their tractor, their mobile home and other garden equipment, so they need this larger store. The size of the store has been reduced since the original submission by about 60 square metres. That was following concerns from the ward member and the parish council and ourselves. So it's down to 100 square metres now, about double the size of the previous store. It will run alongside the road, but the roof will pitch away and the existing Devon bank along this roadside will be retained. And they've also lowered the height of this building is lower than the previous store approved. As I mentioned, it's going to be wooden cladding. There'll be a slight visual impact. So that's the previous store. There'll be a slight visual impact from this roadside here. Just go back. So the building is proposed up here in front of these trees behind this retained bank. So there'll be a slight visual impact, which is the concern I think that the ward member raised, but it's not going to be out of character with the area. The applicants put forward good reasons for it, and subject to it being clad in the timber, we're not concerned about the visual impact of it. So for those reasons, the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Bailey, the ward member, sent in some extra comments yesterday. Do you have those, Wendy? Don't worry, I can read them out if you haven't.
No, I've got them. I just couldn't unmute in time.
Okay.
Bear with me. Okay, yes, I've got them here. So Councillor Bailey has said that this site already has planning consent for a substantial redevelopment, including a detached garage. This site falls within a very rural area designated as open countryside for planning purposes. This proposed enlargement is a step too far, and I support the parish council in their objection to it. The proposed relocation of the garage to the very edge of the site and the enlargement of it is, in my view, unacceptable. The proposed garage is excessively large and would be detrimental to the landscape, in particular the impact on Oak Road. It also involves the felling of a small roadside oak, which I do not agree with. End of statement.
Thank you. Just for clarification, Chris, there's no TPO on the oak, is there?
No, there's not. No, and the previous application for the dwelling accepted the loss of some. They're just small self-seeded trees in the centre of the site, but made sure that these larger trees on the top boundary here were retained, and you can also see new planting to the boundaries of the site.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Key, David.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, in actual fact, I mean, I think moving this dwelling into the centre of the site, I think is very much, sort of beneficial, because there is, rather than it tucked up into one corner. With regard to the size of the building, I mean, if it's going to be a workshop as well as a garage, well, then I can't see too much of a problem there. And I'm quite happy to put forward approval for, as in the recommendation.
Thank you.
I'm going to second that, Chair.
Yeah. You'd like to speak, Councillor Skinner?
I think, in all honesty, Chair, lots of things have been said. I'm really sort of very supportive of it, and I don't think I've got much more to add. I'll leave it to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Woodward, you don't want to speak now, I take it?
I just, it's all been said. I've taken my hand down.
Okay. Over to you, Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members. The motion before you is to approve, subject to the conditions as listed. When your name is called, please would you indicate whether you support the motion to approve, whether you're against the motion to approve, or whether you're abstaining from the vote.
Councillor Bloxham.
Support approval.
Councillor Brown.
Support approval.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Support approval.
Councillor Coleman.
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Support approval.
Councillor De Sarum.
Support approval.
Councillor Gazzard.
Support.
Councillor Howe.
Support.
Councillor Key.
Approve.
Councillor Pook.
Support.
Councillor Pratt.
Support.
Councillor Skinner.
Support approval.
Councillor Whibley.
Support approval.
Councillor Woodward.
Support approval.
Councillor Ragg.
Support approval.
Thank you. So with only one abstention and the rest in support, that vote to approve is carried.
Thank you, Wendy. That brings our meeting to an end, and I'd like to thank everyone, including any members of the public watching online, for taking part. However, can I just remind all those present that the supporting officer will confirm when the meeting is no longer being recorded or going live. Until then, your comments will be live to the public. So thanks very much, officers, as well. It went quite smoothly today, thank goodness, and also fairly quickly. Thank you very much, all of you, for your help.
Thank you, Chair.